Chapter 559. Chu Xiu's temper had never been good. It wasn't his habit to not talk back after being scolded. Moreover, he had appeared with the identity of a demon. If he wasn't more arrogant and insolent, how could he be called a demon? Under the pressure of Chu Xiu's murderous intent, although the three young martial artists of Chunyang Dao sect were shivering, they still held their heads high and revealed an unyielding stance. The three of them were shouting about slaying demons and defending justice. In the eyes of others, the disciples of Chunyang Dao sect seemed to be sick in the head. But in actual fact, to the disciples of Chunyang Dao sect, it was their belief. It was a belief that was instilled in them since they were young. Speaking of which, the reason why Chunyang Dao sect had such a stubborn thought wasn't only related to the personalities of their sect masters, it was also related to the status of Chunyang Dao sect itself. In the past, Chunyang Dao sect was the leader of the world's Dao sects and even the leader of the righteous sections. Others could ignore slaying demons and defending justice, but they had to do so. They had to use such methods to maintain their status. It was a pity that the pugilistic world wasn't black or white. By doing so, Chunyang Dao sect would only create more enmity with the demon sections. To Chunyang Dao sect, there weren't many benefits. It was just like how they were provoking Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu wasn't Taoist Guangning who would let them off. Seeing that Chu Xiu seemed like he was going to kill them, Taoist Guangning couldn't be bothered about breaking the formation anymore. He hurriedly said, "Little friend Lin, give me some face. These three juniors of Dao sect are insensible, so you don't have to be so serious. They don't know what's the most important thing in this small mortal world. Don't you know? Killing them wouldn't bring you any benefits other than offending Chunyang Dao sect." Taoist Guangning was really a good person. This time around, it was Chunyang Dao sect that made a mistake and took the initiative to seek death. Taoist Guangning could pretend that he didn't see it and continue to break the formation. Furthermore, he had already reminded the three pure Yang sect disciples to keep a low profile and not cause trouble. In the end, they did not listen. Therefore, even if Taoist Guangning turned a blind eye to it, he had already done his best. In the end, Taoist Guangning still spoke up for them. This was already generous enough. However, even though Taoist Guangning had good intentions, the three martial arts practitioners of Chunyang Dao sect didn't appreciate his kindness at all. One of them said angrily, "Senior Guangning, you didn't kill this devil Dao villain, but you still call him a little friend. Is this something that our righteous Dao sect would do? Even though our abilities are weak, we aren't people that are afraid of death. If this devil Dao villain dares to touch us, the seniors of our Chunyang Dao sect will naturally take revenge for us in the future." Chu Xiu finally knew wily Lian, who was ranked 4th on the Longhu ranking in the past, that extremely low-profile fella, would kill the geniuses of Chunyang Dao sect. This bunch of fellas simply didn't give anyone a way out. They just had to push the matter into a situation where they wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Just now, Taoist Guangning had already spoken to make peace. He was a senior of the pugilistic world and treated Chu Xiu as an equal. In terms of face, both of them could live. Moreover, he was the only one who could break the formation in this valley. Chu Xiu didn't want to fall out with him. Therefore, as long as the three of them admitted defeat, Chu Xiu would only teach them a lesson. He would still spare their lives. But now, the three of them were obviously forcing Chu Xiu to kill them. Looking at Taoist Guangning, Chu Xiu said in a hoarse voice, "Taoist Guangning, you are a sensible person. This isn't the battlefield of the righteous Dao sect and I didn't initiate any trouble. However, if someone wants to court death, then don't blame me. Someone pointed at my nose and wanted to kill me. If I don't even let out a fart, where would the dignity of my devil Dao be?" As soon as he finished his words, Taoist Guangning's expression changed. He had even tightened his grip on the Dao sword in his hand and said hurriedly, "Wait!" Unfortunately, it was too late. Against 3-5 Chi's Unification Realm martial artists, Chu Xiu didn't need to put in so much effort. With a wave of his hand, his mental strength turned into distorted strings. Following Chu Xiu's plucking, the soul-absorbing zither melody exploded. Soul-suppressing Hades tune, sending you to the underworld. Now, Chu Xiu's mental strength had even surpassed most of the martial arts masters. Against 3-5 Chi's Unification Realm martial artists, it was simply a one-sided battle. In an instant, the three Chunyang Dao sect martial artists were bleeding from their 7 apertures. The pure yang qi that protected their bodies didn't even have the slightest bit of resistance before their bodies were penetrated by the powerful mental strength. The 3 Chunyang Dao sect martial artists laid on the ground. They didn't even have the chance to let out a cry. This scene made everyone's heart turn cold. First, they were shocked by Lin Ye's demonic killing method. Historically, mental attacks were the hardest to defend against. Primordial spirit secret techniques were still a minority in the pugilistic world. However, once it was cultivated to perfection, its power would be extremely terrifying, just like Nansong's Xiahou clan. Xiahou clan's imperial spirit technique was simple and direct with overbearing power. However, Lin Ye's primordial spirit secret technique had a strong demonic color and was extremely demonic. The second thing that shocked them was Lin Ye's way of doing things. He was simply unscrupulous and overbearing to the extreme. In recent years, diabolism had been on the decline. Everyone had always heard of heroes from the righteous path killing demons and being praised by the people of the pugilistic world. It was rare to hear of outstanding disciples from sects being killed by diabolism. It seemed that apart from the overbearing power displayed by moon-worshipping cult during the Battle of Mount Floating Jade, diabolism rarely showed such unyielding strength. In the end, Chu Xiu killed 3 outstanding disciples of the pure Yang Daoist sect's younger generation without hesitation. He was very decisive. The last outstanding disciple from Chunyang Dao sect who had reached the oneness of heaven and man realm was killed by Li Feilian with 2 slashes. This time, Zhan Yangzi brought another 4 young disciples with him to oneness of heaven and man realm. After oneness of heaven and man realm, 1 or 2 of them would have reached the oneness of heaven and man realm. In the end, 3 of the 4 people were killed by Lin Yi. Chunyang Dao sect was probably going to vomit blood this time. Seeing the 3 disciples of Chunyang Dao sect being killed in front of him, Daoist Guangning's eyes revealed a hint of anger. Dao sect was like birds of a feather. The 3 of them were the younger generation of Dao sect. In the end, they were killed in front of him. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, Daoist Guangning obviously couldn't stay silent. Seeing Daoist Guangning's action, Chu Xiu's hand held onto the hatred blade behind his back and said plainly, "Daoist Guangning, everything in this world has to be reasonable. If you were to find a way out of this embarrassing situation, I would give you face. However, these 3 idiots have already made their decision. What do you want me to do? Now that I've killed them, if Dao sect wants to find trouble with me, I'll take them on. To put it bluntly, I've fought with more than 1 or 2 martial arts grandmasters." Some people who had participated in the Black Demon Tower immediately thought of the previous battle. The head of Dharma Institute, Su Xing, was severely injured by the 7 strange demonic blades behind Lin Yi. Nobody present knew the price of using the 7 demonic blades. In their opinion, Chu Xiu's deterrence was basically the same as a martial arts grandmaster. Just when the situation was tense, Huangfu Weiming pulled Daoist Guangning's hand and said in a deep voice, "Daoist Guangning, don't be impulsive. You also said that we're not here to slay demons and defend justice after entering Xiaofan heaven. The people of Chunyang Dao sect were courting death. You've already done your best. Do you want to get yourself involved now? Listen to my advice and let this matter go. Lin Yi is an outstanding figure cultivated by the Yinma clan. Don't treat him as an ordinary junior. You know Su Xing's strength. His Vajra Buddha flame suppresses demons and punishes evil. It's more powerful for martial artists who practice demonic techniques. However, Su Xing was seriously injured by this kid's demonic blades. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about your true martial sect. Once something happens to you in Xiaofan heaven, the 2 young people of your true martial sect will have no backing." Yu Qifeng didn't add fuel to the fire this time. He just comforted him. "That's right. Old Daoist, you have to calm down. Even if you really want to attack that kid, there's still a chance later. Don't be in a hurry." Of course, Huangfu Weiming and Yu Qifeng weren't so kind. Everything was for Daoist Guangning's sake. They stopped Daoist Guangning because they were afraid that Daoist Guangning and Lin Yi would really fight. Without anyone to break the formation, they wouldn't be able to enter the valley. A place that was able to preserve such a complete formation during the ancient Great Calamity would definitely have a lot of good stuff. Daoist Guangning wasn't a member of Chunyang Dao sect. He was still willing to listen to advice. In the end, Daoist Guangning let go of the hand that was holding the Dao sword. He turned around and went to break the formation without saying a word. Everyone present heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this scene. After all, now that Taoist Guangning had opened the formation, they could still go in and get some benefits. If Taoist Guangning and Lin Yi were to fight to the death, they could only watch the show. They wouldn't even get any benefits. Only LV Fengxian secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Brother Chu was a little too aggressive. It seemed that after he revealed his identity as a devil cultivator, his way of doing things had become closer to the devil cultivators. No, it should be said that he was even more radical than the devil cultivators. Taoist Guangning turned around and continued to break the formation. After about an hour, the formation in front of the valley let out a soft sound. Instantly, rays of light shone brightly. Everyone's eyes lit up. The formation was broken. As the formation was broken, there were some changes at the entrance of the valley. The entire entrance became like a layer of ripples on the surface of the water. Taoist Guangning was the first to reach out his hand and directly pass through the ripples. There wasn't any abnormality. Therefore, he directly stepped into the ripples on the surface of the water. Upon seeing this, Yu Qifeng and the rest also followed suit. After the ripples on the surface of the water, a fragrant aroma assaulted their faces. What appeared in front of everyone was a scene of birds chirping and flowers fragrant. It was as beautiful as a paradise. Chapter 560. Most of the scenes in Xiaofan heaven were extremely dilapidated, just like the spirit treasure temple that Chu Xiu had been to before and the Black Demon Tower. They were all dilapidated beyond recognition. However, the valley in front of them was extremely well preserved. There was a small bridge and flowing water, birds were chirping, and flowers were fragrant. It was simply like a fairyland. However, there were layers of mist in the valley, which made it difficult for them to see what was in front of them. However, they could still see the pavilions and towers in the distance. Everyone immediately became spirited. Such a well-preserved relic was extremely rare in Xiaofan heaven. The more well-preserved it was, the more benefits it had. They had picked up a treasure this time. Everyone thought so and also walked into the valley. What came into view was a small bridge and a small river that was only a few meters wide. However, the river was a bit muddy, and they couldn't see what was in it. The small bridge was extremely exquisite, and it was covered with all kinds of runes. There was also a big stone beside the bridge. Guangning, who was walking at the front, stared at the runes on the bridge and frowned. He didn't continue to walk forward. Yu Qifeng and Huang Fu Wei knew that Guangning must have discovered something, so they didn't urge him. However, the small bridge was a bit too exquisite. It could only accommodate one person at a time, so it was a bit crowded for two people. Therefore, although the martial artists at the back were anxious, they didn't dare to let the three people in front of them pass first. Chu Xiu had the ability to do so. He secretly used the heaven sun gazing at air technique and looked at the small bridge and river. His eyes were suddenly filled with a strange color. He didn't move, but just stood behind the three people obediently. However, some of the people present couldn't wait any longer. The small river was only a few meters wide. For an expert of the unity of heaven and man realm, they could cross it with a single leap. Therefore, one of the martial artists couldn't help but move his body and directly cross to the other side of the river. However, just as his body reached the middle of the river, there was a sudden change. The originally muddy river had now turned into an evil yellowish-brown color. It was greasy like a slurry, emitting a nauseating smell. Some of the people present had smelled it before. It was the stench of a corpse. No one dared to imagine what the yellow-brown river water was that carried the stench of corpses. What was truly frightening was that whirlpools suddenly appeared in the river water, and more than 10 evil spirits surged out of the river water. Their faces were ashen, as if they had been starved for hundreds of years, leaving only a layer of skin on their skeletons. Their bodies were slightly transparent and covered in the yellowish-brown corpse fluid. One could even see their pitch-black bones through their transparent bodies. No matter how much the one with the Heaven Realm martial artist released his gang chi, it was useless. In less than a breath's time, he was entangled by these evil things and then dragged into the yellowish-brown corpse river. The corpse water surged, and the martial artist howled miserably. His body was corroded and melted by the corpse water, becoming transparent. However, the bones inside had yet to turn black, but his appearance was already exactly the same as those evil spirits. After a while, the martial artist was completely assimilated and sank into the water along with those evil spirits. The yellowish-brown corpse water was hidden under the surface of the river, and the entire river became the same as before. It was slightly muddy, but it was incomparably calm. However, everyone present took a step back in unison, and their eyes revealed incomparable horror. Under the seemingly calm surface of the river, there were such evil spirits and evil spirits hidden. 90% of the people present were from large aristocratic families or sections. They were all people who had seen the world. They had seen spirit beasts, fierce beasts, and all kinds of incomparably evil things. However, just like the river in front of them, there were some evil spirits and evil spirits inside. What was this thing? Chu Xiu was silent at the side. In fact, when he used the heaven sun gazing at air to check just now, he had already discovered that something was wrong. There was a formation in the middle of the river, so even if Chu Xiu used the heaven sun gazing at air, he could not see the detailed scene inside. However, Chu Xiu could see that there were very powerful negative emotions and extremely dense mental strength hidden in the river, so he was cautious and did not make a move. Yu Qifeng said with a solemn expression, "Old Taoist, what are these evil spirits?" Even Yu Qifeng was afraid of the scene just now. He could not see through the details of those vengeful spirits and evil spirits at all. However, the mental fluctuations revealed by some of the vengeful spirits and evil spirits were not inferior to a martial Dao Grand Master. Taoist Guangning said in a deep voice, "Have you heard of the underworld water and the bridge of helplessness?" Yu Qifeng was shocked, and his voice changed. "What did you say?" "This river is the underworld water, and this bridge is the bridge of helplessness? Could it be that we are in the underworld?" Everyone present felt a chill down their spine after hearing this. This kind of thing that only existed in legends suddenly appeared in front of you. Even a martial Dao master like Yu Qifeng could not remain calm. Taoist Guangning rolled his eyes at him and said, "Don't be so surprised, I only asked if you have heard of it. Who told you that this is the underworld water and the bridge of helplessness?" Yu Qifeng said angrily, "If not, then why are you asking?" Taoist Guangning said in a deep voice, "Although this place is not the underworld water and the bridge of helplessness, it is an imitation of the legendary underworld water and the bridge of helplessness. There are countless evil corpse energies in the river, and there is also a formation set up. As long as someone falls into the river, they will immediately be sucked dry by the underworld water that is filled with corpse energies. At the same time, their mental strength will not dissipate, but will attach to the remaining body and be assimilated into this evil spirit. I have never heard of this kind of evil formation. In the entire river, only the small bridge is engraved with the antidote rune, so it is safe." Yu Qifeng suddenly understood. He suddenly pointed at the stone and said, "Then this stone is the 3 live stone?" Taoist Guangning nodded and said, "Logically speaking, it should be, but this should be a strange treasure. It was refined by a master blacksmith and some strange methods of divination master. Combined with the rune power of the bridge of helplessness, it can calculate the origin of a person's past life, but it should be impossible to calculate the future. Even if a powerful divination master were to calculate the future, even a small matter would consume their blood, sweat, and lifespan. This is only an artifact that was refined by someone. It can only be seen for fun, don't take it seriously." As he said this, Taoist Guangning took the initiative to walk over and put his hand on the 3 live stone. Instantly, a faint light enveloped it, but after a moment, it disappeared. Yu Qifeng asked doubtfully, "Old Taoist, what did you see?" Taoist Guangning smiled and shook his head. "As expected, I can't see the future, but I saw a monk. Could it be that I was a monk in my past life?" Although Taoism and Buddhism were both orthodox sects, Taoism and Buddhism were not on the same side. Even Taoist Guangning, who was a good person, didn't have a good expression when he saw the monks from the Great Light Temple. His attitude was even worse than Chu Xiu, who was a martial artist from the demonic path. It could be imagined how great the hatred between Taoism and Buddhism was. Without the threat of the demonic Tao, the conflicts between Taoist and Buddhism were the most frequent. Therefore, if this Taoist Guangning was really a monk in his past life, then it would be interesting. However, Taoist Guangning said that this thing was only an artifact and shouldn't be taken seriously. After all, no one dared to say that they completely believed in the future of their past life and reincarnation. Yu Qifeng also went over to touch the stone, but then he shook his head and said, "This thing is really not accurate. How could I be a scholar in my past life?" After saying that, he followed Taoist Guangning onto the bridge of helplessness and walked to the other side of the river. The people behind him also stepped in one after another and touched the 3 live stone along the way. It didn't matter if this thing was accurate or not, it was always fun to look at it. When it was Lu Fengxian's turn, his expression was a little weird. Luo Feiheng asked curiously, "Brother Lu, who did you see?" Lu Fengxian scratched his head and said, "I saw myself. I was holding the unparalleled divine weapon and wearing battle armor. However, I couldn't see my face clearly." Luo Feiheng rolled his eyes and said, "That's not right. I feel that the person you saw should be Marquis Lu. Didn't everyone say that you are the reincarnation of Marquis Lu? Maybe you were really Marquis Lu in your past life?" Lu Fengxian shrugged his shoulders. He didn't know either. One had to know that he personally saw Marquis Lu's true soul shatter and fuse with his body. If he was Marquis Lu in his past life, then who was the true soul fragment that fused with his body? Lu Fengxian didn't care about this kind of thing. However, when Luo Feiheng finished touching the 3 live stone, her face was a little red. Lu Fengxian asked curiously, "Who was your past life?" Luo Feiheng didn't say anything. He only pushed Lu Fengxian and said with slight anger, "Why are you asking so much? Don't you know that some women's secrets can't be said? Let's go, don't waste time." Seeing Luo Feiheng's expression, Lu Fengxian became even more curious. However, his personality was indifferent. Since Luo Feiheng didn't want to say, he didn't ask. Chu Xiu followed behind Lu Fengxian and stepped onto the bridge of helplessness. The others were very interested in the 3 live stone, but Chu Xiu didn't really care about it. The others didn't know who they were in their past lives, but Chu Xiu knew. However, when he walked to the 3 live stone, Chu Xiu also touched it subconsciously. In an instant, a faint light enveloped Chu Xiu. However, what appeared in front of him wasn't what he expected. It wasn't the appearance of his past life. It wasn't the appearance of anything else, but nothing. What appeared in front of Chu Xiu was an empty space. It was a complete void. This made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. Regardless of whether it was real or fake, why did all kinds of people appear when other people touched the 3 live stone, but he didn't? Was it because he had transmigrated? However, Chu Xiu didn't pay too much attention to this matter. However, when the others behind saw that Chu Xiu had stopped for a long time, they were quite dissatisfied and secretly discussed. Of course, they only dared to discuss in secret. Chu Xiu didn't care about it and turned around to leave. However, when he turned around, a crack appeared on the 3 live stone, and it instantly lost all its spiritual energy. Chapter 561. Chu Xiu was stunned by the sudden crack of the 3 live stone. The warriors at the back thought that Chu Xiu had secretly done something to the 3 live stone because of their previous discussion. Due to Chu Xiu's previous power, they didn't dare to say anything. However, they were secretly muttering, "This guy from the demonic path is really stingy. It seems that we have to be careful of Lin Yi in the future. We must not speak ill of him in front of him." Chu Xiu frowned. He didn't see anything on the 3 live stone. However, the 3 live stone suddenly cracked after he finished looking at it. This strange thing made Chu Xiu feel a little uncomfortable. However, it wasn't the time to think about this. It was more important to get some benefits in the Xiaofan heaven. Guang Ning and the others who were at the front walked very slowly. The others at the back didn't dare to rush either. They were afraid that they would encounter some evil things. Previously, they thought that this place was a paradise with birds chirping and flowers fragrant. It must be the residence of a big righteous sect. However, when they saw the strangeness of the underworld and walked across the bridge of helplessness, they completely threw this thought to the back of their minds. How could this be a secluded big righteous sect? It was clearly an evil devil's den. Everyone continued to move forward, and the pavilions that were previously hidden in the mist appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Previously, they felt that these pavilions that were hidden in the fog had a trace of a mortal aura. However, they could only feel a dense ghostly aura now. What appeared before everyone's eyes was a large expanse of complete buildings. Although all of the buildings were incomparably grand, the outer layer was painted pitch black. Moreover, there were strange runes engraved on the exterior of the buildings, giving off a feeling of irritation. On top of the main hall at the front, there were 4 big words written on a white plaque: Blissful Devil Palace. Guang Ning frowned. He was experienced and knowledgeable. There were many ancient books in the true martial arts sect. However, he had never heard of this Blissful Devil Palace. However, looking at the scale of the ruins, the powerful formation and the evil underworld water bridge of helplessness, This blissful devil palace must be a top demonic sect in ancient times. Yu Qifeng led the way. He pushed open the palace door. His sharp white tiger baleful god power was exerted to the extreme. His entire body seemed like a weapon. The door was pushed open. There wasn't any danger inside. However, the scene inside was somewhat beyond everyone's imagination. The hall that looked neat and tidy on the outside was in a mess on the inside. All kinds of chairs were scattered on the ground, and at the center of the hall, there should have been something like a statue. However, it had already been moved away, leaving only a mark. Everyone present looked at each other. They had a strange feeling. It was as if the people of the blissful demon palace had left in a hurry. They could even tell from these traces that the warriors of the blissful demon palace had been in a panic 10,000 years ago. It was as if they would have lost their lives if they had been a second slower. There were simply too many things that had been moved out of the main hall. The floor was a mess, and there were many things in a mess. Everyone searched for a while. They didn't find anything valuable. So, they continued to explore. Behind the main hall was a large number of pavilions and palaces. Usually, these places were where the disciples of the blissful devil palace stayed in seclusion, as well as their residences. Even the armory and pill store were located here. In fact, this area was the most precious place in the entire blissful devil palace. However, when everyone stepped into this area, they felt that the fog here was thicker than the underworld bridge. They couldn't even see their faces clearly. Fortunately, although everyone's perception was somewhat suppressed, it wasn't too serious. Taoist Guangning frowned and said, "Everyone, be careful." The blissful devil palace's warriors left very strangely. They were in a hurry. So, they didn't close some of the formations. They didn't take some of the things with them. It's best not to touch the things here before you have the confidence. Otherwise, once the formations are activated, it won't be fun. You'll only harm yourself and others. Taoist Guangning was doing this for their own good. These ancient arrays were originally very evil, especially this extreme bliss devil palace. Even he had to be careful around it. However, the others didn't think so. To them, they were already at a disadvantage when competing with Taoist Guangning and the other martial masters. They could only get a little bit of soup. If they took the initiative and left after getting a treasure, it would be worth it. Although there were risks, they knew the principle of seeking riches amidst danger. Everyone was afraid of death. But in the face of benefits, they weren't afraid of death. If they were all extremely cautious and fearful, they wouldn't have been able to cultivate to their current level. Looking at the others' expressions, Taoist Guangning couldn't help but shake his head. Yu Qifeng sneered, "Old Taoist, why do you care about them? They're courting death. You can't stop them. If something really happens, let their sect feel sorry for them. It's not your turn to feel sorry for them." Taoist Guangning didn't say anything. He carefully explored the place. As he walked, Taoist Guangning frowned. This blissful devil palace is a bit strange. The formations are too intact. Huangfu Weiming said, since this blissful devil palace was a great demonic sect in the past, they should have some foundation. It's normal for them to survive in the calamity of the world. Taoist Guangning shook his head. That's what I thought in the beginning. But soon, I realized something was wrong. Look at the situation in the hall. Those disciples of blissful devil palace left in a hurry. Obviously, the situation has reached a critical moment. That's why a great demonic sect was so flustered. If the blissful demon palace's formation was really so powerful that it could withstand the great tribulation of heaven and earth, then why did the disciples of the blissful demon palace flee in such a hurry? Wasn't it better for them to stay in the formation? This is actually the third time I've entered the minor mortal world. I've explored a few ruins in the minor mortal world. All of them had different degrees of damage. I couldn't find a ruin that wasn't damaged at all. There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. Anyway, this blissful devil palace doesn't seem right to me. Very wrong. Right at this moment, a soft exclamation came from the crowd. Everyone was startled and turned to look in that direction. A 5-cheese origin realm martial artist said helplessly, "My senior brother isn't here. He was behind me just now." But as he walked, he disappeared. There were about 70 to 80 people who entered the valley. It could be seen at a glance. At this time, everyone suddenly looked around and found that there were more than 10 people missing in their midst. However, The identities of the warriors present were a little too complicated. There were people from various sects and clans. Therefore, even though some people were missing from the crowd didn't really care. They thought that these people didn't listen to Taoist Guangning's advice and went off to act alone. Only when this martial artist's senior brother disappeared did the crowd feel that something was wrong. Something must have gone wrong. But at this moment, a chewing sound came from the fog. Everyone shuddered when they heard it. A black shadow quickly flashed through the fog. In an instant, a warrior screamed miserably, and his figure instantly disappeared into the fog. Everyone was shocked. Taoist Guangning yelled, "Pay attention to the surroundings." Just as he finished speaking, dozens of black shadows attacked them from the fog. Their speed was so fast that even the Union of Heaven and Man realm martial artists could barely see their silhouettes. Faced with this kind of attack, Xiaofan snorted coldly. The white tiger baleful divine wind around his body exploded. A figure crashed into his body and was immediately minced into a cloud of black and purple bloody mist by the incomparably sharp and powerful Gang Qi. It seemed somewhat disgusting. Taoist Guangning swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. It seemed to be a casual move, but it directly flung away several of those figures. Only Huangfu Weiming's strength was slightly weaker. But no matter how weak he was still a martial arts grandmaster. The attacks of those figures were a great threat to the Five Qis unification of Heaven and Man realm martial artists. They were slightly weaker to the unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists. But when facing a martial arts grandmaster, they didn't pose a threat at all. And when Chu Xiao faced these things, he had to occupy a greater advantage. What Chu Xiao was least afraid of were fast things. When the Heaven Sun gazing at air technique was used, the speed of those black shadows was simply extremely slow in his eyes. Boundless demonic energy exploded in his hand. Chu Xiao directly grabbed the black shadow in his hand. But when he saw that thing, even Chu Xiao was shocked. It was a humanoid thing that was only half the height of a normal person. It was called a thing because although it had a humanoid shape, it didn't look like a human. That thing had sharp claws on its hands and feet, but its head was one size bigger than a normal person. Its belly was even bigger than its head. They looked ferocious, and their skin was shriveled to the point that only a layer of skin was left. There were sharp teeth in their mouths, but their eyes revealed a crazy bloodthirsty intent. There was not a single trace of blood in them. The strangest thing was on their heads. The skin there was actually transparent, and there was a drop of pitch-black liquid in their heads, which was very conspicuous. This thing actually looked very similar to the hungry ghost of the Hell Path in the legends. What exactly did those guys from the Blissful Demon Palace refine? That thing was still struggling in Chu Xiao's hand. But at this moment, Chu Xiao's heart started to throb. The glazed golden thread goo was constantly releasing a thought, as if it was very eager for the thing in Chu Xiao's hand. Chapter 562. The glazed golden silk goo was a living creature, but no matter how strong it was only a goo worm. Therefore, it had no intelligence and only instincts. At this time, Chu Xiao could clearly sense the glazed golden silk goo's desire for this thing, but he did not know what it was longing for. Chu Xiao exerted force in his hand, wanting to crush this thing to death, but he did not succeed. Although this thing looked extremely thin and weak, its body was comparable to gold and iron, and it had a certain degree of resistance to Gang Qi. Demonic energy erupted, and the hungry ghost-like thing's neck was completely broken by Chu Xiao. However, it was not dead yet, and its body was still twitching. Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and pointed with a finger. A powerful demonic energy condensed at one point, and directly smashed the thing's head. However, at this time, the black liquid in the thing's head involuntarily seeped into Chu Xiao's body, flowing along Chu Xiao's meridians and blood vessels, flowing into the glazed golden silk goo and being devoured. This situation was not initiated by Chu Xiao, but the glazed golden silk goo's passive behavior. Even Chu Xiao was shocked and wanted to stop it, but it was too late. The glazed golden silk goo was symbiotic with Chu Xiao's body, which was equivalent to a part of Chu Xiao's body. How could he stop his body's subconscious reaction? However, that drop of strange black liquid did not cause any harm to Chu Xiao. A part of its power was devoured by the glazed golden silk goo, causing the glazed golden silk goo's rhythm to become stronger. The remaining part of the power was integrated into Chu Xiao's spiritual power, which actually increased Chu Xiao's spiritual power. There was also an indescribable feeling that made Chu Xiao a little uncertain. However, there was one thing that Chu Xiu was sure of. Killing this thing and taking the black liquid in its head would be beneficial to the glazed golden silk goo and his spiritual power. At this moment, the demon-like thing pounced on them, causing some of the weaker cultivators to fall victim to its attacks. Taoist Guangning frowned and threw out an array disc. In an instant, the yin and yang powers rotated within the array disc. At the same time, a black and a white long sword fell into the array disc, triggering a surge of sword qi. Within a few hundred meters, the fog was dispersed, revealing an extremely horrifying scene. Outside the fog, a number of malevolent-looking evil spirits were desperately biting the corpses of the cultivators. There were even several evil spirits tearing at the same corpse. The entire scene was like hell. Even Yu Qifeng felt his scalp tingle when he saw this scene. He couldn't help but ask, "Old Taoist, what are these things? Is there a dire beast that looks like this?" Taoist Guangning's expression turned ugly. "Ferocious beast, my ass. These things used to be people. What extreme bliss demon palace. It should be called Hell Demon Palace. These lunatics. They actually want to refine the evil spirits of the hungry ghost realm. I've read in some ancient books of the true martial sect that there was a devil who wreaked havoc in Jianghu in ancient times. He was called the demonic lord of 6 paths. He was a lunatic, the kind of lunatic who was truly insane. He actually imagined himself to have 6 personalities. Moreover, each personality was a genius in martial arts. He wanted to refine the incarnation of the 6 paths of reincarnation using a secret technique. Then, he would sever his soul into 6 parts and fuse them into the incarnation. For this, the demonic lord of 6 paths had killed countless people to conduct experiments. Among them, the incarnation of the hungry ghost realm looked like this. He would capture countless infants and place a formation on their bodies to gradually erase their consciousness. Then, he would feed them with elixirs every day. After their souls were erased, they would be like walking corpses with only their instincts left. Then, they would be thrown into a closed space without any food or water. They would be made to kill each other and feed on each other's flesh and blood. Finally, they would be raised like a poisonous insect. That would be the incarnation of the hungry ghost realm. I've seen the diagram in the ancient books. The incarnation of the hungry ghost realm looked like this. However, it was much larger than these things. It was also much more powerful. It was a real hungry ghost from hell. However, it was recorded in the ancient books that the demonic lord of 6 paths had been killed by many experts of Jianghu because of his inhumane behavior. I didn't expect that the people of the blissful devil palace had obtained this secret technique from somewhere. They were actually refining such inhumane things. Every hungry ghost here represented the lives of countless innocent infants. Even if these people were people from tens of thousands of years ago, Guangning still felt extremely angry about this matter. After hearing this, Chu Xiu also frowned. Although he had cultivated many demonic techniques, he wouldn't cultivate such inhumane demonic techniques. Demons existed between heaven and earth. Although orthodox demonic techniques represented the negative energy between heaven and earth, there would always be yin and yang in everything. Techniques were just a kind of attribute. Whether it was a righteous technique or a demonic technique, if you used it to save people, it would be good. If you used it to kill people, it would be evil. Any technique was inhumane. However, as long as the person who cultivated it was a human, there would still be a trace of humanity left. Currently, those famous demonic overlords in Jianghu, whether it was Dugu Weiwei who suppressed the world in the past, or the current cult master of moon-worshipping cult, Yi Xiaonan, they had killed many people. However, what they killed were the lives of martial artists. There was no demonic overlord that became famous by slaughtering ordinary people. Such people were even despised by the demonic path itself. They couldn't be considered as demonic path anymore. They were more like demons. At this moment, Yu Qifeng looked at those hungry ghosts and frowned. These things have lived since ancient times. It has already been 10,000 years. Are they still alive? Enlightened Guangning frowned. I'm also puzzled about this. These things haven't completely devoured and evolved. In other words, they haven't truly become the incarnation of the hungry ghost Tao. In order to let them live after 10,000 years, it's possible to use some methods to make their souls hibernate. However, the people of Blissful Devil Palace have already left. Who made them hibernate? At this moment, a melodious flute sound suddenly resounded. The flute sound was mellow and melodious, but it was filled with boundless resentment. After listening to it, people couldn't help but feel upset. However, after those hungry ghosts heard the flute sound, they seemed to have received some kind of order. They quickly gathered together and didn't even care about eating the corpses anymore. In the dense fog, a white-clothed figure walked out. The white-clothed figure was actually a handsome young man. His hair was combed into a simple bun. He held an emerald-green bamboo flute in his hand, and his skin was frighteningly pale. It was actually somewhat similar to the grayish-white skin of those hungry ghosts. The young man slowly walked over and gently touched the heads of those hungry ghosts. These evil monsters actually stood obediently by his side, appearing abnormally docile. Looking at the corpses on the ground that had already been devoured by the hungry ghosts, the young man's eyes instantly revealed a trace of surprise. He picked up a relatively intact arm, and the corner of his mouth suddenly revealed a trace of a smile. That smile, coupled with his handsome face, should have been a very sunny scene, but it gave people a kind of evil feeling. Picking up the severed arm and placing it in front of his eyes, the handsome young man suddenly opened his mouth. His mouth widened to an extremely evil and terrifying extent. Inside his mouth were neat teeth, but they were densely packed with sharp teeth like those of hungry ghosts. In an instant, the young man swallowed the entire arm into his stomach, letting out a series of disgusting chewing sounds. After a while, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and revealed a trace of an intoxicated expression on his face. With a slightly strange accent he said, "The feeling of flesh and blood is so good. It's been 10,000 years, and I can finally taste flesh and blood again." Previously, everyone thought that this young man was a living person, and that he had used some kind of secret technique to survive from the ancient times until now. But now, it seemed that this guy was not a human at all, but clearly the strongest hungry ghost here. While controlling the yin-yang duality sword formation, Taoist Guangning asked in a deep voice, "What are you?" The young man rubbed his head and said, "Thing? I seem to have forgotten a lot of things. Old Taoist, you're a sensible person. You should know that hungry ghosts don't have divine souls or spiritual intelligence. They're completely like walking corpses. I spent a lot of effort to retain my spiritual intelligence after turning into a hungry ghost. Now, I can't remember many things, including my own name. I'm just a pitiful worm forgotten by the blissful devil palace. I only remember that I'm responsible for feeding these disgusting guys." In the end they all left. Master, senior martial uncle, senior martial brothers and sisters all left. I was forgotten in this completely empty blissful devil palace. In order to preserve my life, I could only take the initiative to turn myself into these guys that I usually feel disgusted by. It's been 10,000 years, I've been sleeping, waking up, and sleeping again. I've been mending the formation, mending the blissful devil palace, waiting for Master and the others to return. Do you guys have any news about Master and the others? That young man looked at Taoist Guangning and the others with a sincere expression. His appearance didn't have the slightest hint of the evil and terrifying look he had just now. Everyone had more or less understood what was going on. This guy was indeed a pitiful worm. Everyone in the blissful devil palace had already left before the ancient great calamity. In the end, no one knew if it was intentional or unintentional, but he was the only one left. In the end, in order to preserve his life, he actually turned himself into a hungry ghost from hell. As long as he was awake, he would mend the formation of the blissful devil palace. That was why this place looked so complete. Taoist Guangning looked at that young man and said coldly, "News? Your blissful devil palace has long been annihilated. How can there be any news? You guys actually dared to try refining an evil secret technique like the hungry ghost path's incarnation. It's simply intolerable for the blissful devil palace to not die in the ancient great calamity." That young man sighed in disappointment. "Oh, so that's how it is." As soon as he finished speaking, waves of black gas with the stench of corpses appeared around him. Even the 3 martial Tao masters present felt a chill run down their spines when they sensed the aura. "If that's the case, then you guys are useless. Just obediently become my blood food. I'll be very gentle when I eat you guys. I won't be as dirty as those ugly things." Chapter 563. There were many dangers in Xiaofan Heaven, but for those who had already understood most of the rules of the ruins in Xiaofan Heaven, the real danger in Xiaofan Heaven wasn't the ruins that were already broken, but the warriors who entered Xiaofan Heaven with them. In the past, The most dangerous things in Xiaofan heaven were only the remnants of the broken arrays from the great calamity of heaven and earth. Their lethality was limited, and the people who died in the hands of the same people would definitely be more than those who died in these arrays. In the end, who would have thought that they would be so unlucky this time and enter such a devil's den? Before they even saw the item, more than 10 people had already died. At this moment, the young man's body was completely shrouded by corpse energy. The nails on his hands rapidly grew to a few feet long, like sharp swords. At the same time, his appearance had already begun to distort, and his eyes were glowing with red light. At this moment, he was even more terrifying than those malicious ghosts. A shrill howl resounded, and the young man directly pounced towards Taoist Guangning and the others. His speed was even faster than those ordinary hungry ghosts by a few times. It was as though he had teleported, and in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of the three of them. Taoist Guangning's hands formed a sword finger, and the yin-yang dual-pole Dao sword transformed into Taiji sword Qi. However, as the young man waved his sharp claws, the sword Qi was actually torn apart in an instant. Huangfu Wei Ming, who was behind Taoist Guangning, formed a seal with his hands, and boundless Gang Qi condensed into a huge seal the size of a small mountain. It fell with a loud bang, suppressing the heaven and earth, and its power was majestic and shocking. However, the young man who had transformed into a hungry ghost was shockingly strong. He didn't have any Gang Qi, but he relied on his own strength to forcefully smash the huge seal made of Gang Qi. Demon die! Yuchi Feng was the last to make a move. The white tiger baleful god shield condensed into a huge blade, and with incomparable sharpness and killing intent, it slashed down with a loud bang. In the end, the young man was slashed by Yuchi Feng, and flew over 100 feet away. However, Yuchi Feng's blade only left a tear on his clothes, and revealed the grayish-white skin underneath. However, there was only a mark on it, and there wasn't even a wound. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Taoist Guangning and the others changed. Among the three of them, Taoist Guangning was the strongest in terms of cultivation accumulation. However, in terms of pure destructive power, Yuchi Feng was the strongest. The White Tiger Hall's White Tiger Baleful Divinity Force was renowned in the world. It condensed the strength of the Western White Tiger, Eugene, and it was incomparably sharp. At the same time, it drew in killing intent and baleful qi into it, adding 30% to its might. It was said that when the White Tiger Baleful Divine Wind was cultivated to its peak, it could even go head-on against a divine weapon. In the end, Yuchi Feng's saber had only left a white mark on the young man who had transformed into a hungry ghost. Just how strong was this fellow's defensive power? However, at this moment, it was already not their turn to sigh. That ravenous ghost-like young man was once again surrounded by black corpse qi as he roared and charged towards them. For a moment, Taoist Guangning and the other two could only barely withstand the attack of that ravenous ghost-like young man. Not only was the opponent's physical body strong, the corpse aura surrounding his body was also poisonous. It even had the effect of corroding other people's Gang Qi. Therefore, the more they fought, the worse the state of Taoist Guangning and the other two became. At this moment, the other hungry ghosts also pounced forward and fought with the crowd. Everyone present was instantly caught in a bitter battle. But while the others were fighting bitterly, Chu Xiu's eyes lit up. The demonic qi around his body erupted to the extreme. When he saw a hungry ghost, he directly smashed its head with a punch. That black liquid then fused into Chu Xiu's body and was first devoured by the glazed golden thread goo. Then, a portion of the power was used to strengthen Chu Xiu's mental strength. No matter how hard the bodies of these hungry ghosts were, they couldn't compare to Chu Xiu's physical body, which cultivated the great Vajra divine strength and the nine heavens fiend golden body. His strength erupted to the extreme. It was very easy for him to kill one with a punch. After Chu Xiu had killed all the hungry ghosts around him, his gaze turned towards the others. These hungry ghosts had amazing defense and were extremely difficult to deal with. Unless one had explosive strength like Chu Xiu, even a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm would find it difficult to cause harm to them. Therefore, most of the people present were having a hard time. And it was the same for Lu Fengxian's side. Actually, with Lu Fengxian's strength, it wasn't a problem for her to deal with these hungry ghosts. It was just that with Luo Feiheng's strength, it would be difficult for Luo Feiheng to deal with these hungry ghosts alone. Moreover, Lu Fengxian still had to take care of Luo Feiheng, which was somewhat taxing. Chu Xiu's figure moved, but he didn't directly help Lu Fengxian. Instead, he first killed all the hungry ghosts around Lu Fengxian and then went to help Lu Fengxian. After killing those hungry ghosts, Chu Xiu only exchanged a glance with Lu Fengxian and then continued to kill other hungry ghosts. Luo Feiheng held the blood spear red kite in her hand and asked curiously, "This guy from the Devil Dao is actually helping us?" Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "Some people from the Devil Dao don't kill innocent people, and some people from the Righteous Dao don't do chivalry." Luo Feiheng nodded. She had been in the underworld for a long time, so she naturally knew this principle. At this moment, the others also felt very strange. They thought to themselves, did Lin Ye's character change? They still remembered the scene of Lin Yi ruthlessly killing the 3 disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect. He didn't show any mercy and was extremely ruthless. In the end, he actually took the initiative to help them. Was there anything more strange than this in the world? Although the people present couldn't understand, they naturally couldn't fall behind when they saw that Lin Yi had helped them kill the hungry ghosts. If they couldn't kill them alone, they would kill them together. However, their actions made Chu Xiu very unhappy. Those hungry ghosts had to be killed as soon as possible in order to absorb the black liquid. If they were too late, the black liquid would immediately evaporate. Therefore, these people's actions seemed to be helping, but in fact, they were harming his interests. "All of you get lost!" Chu Xiu shouted angrily at the few warriors who were besieging a hungry ghost, causing them to be stunned. "We're helping you reduce your burden, but you're scolding us here. Is Lin Yi crazy?" Seeing that these people didn't stop, Chu Xiu directly punched with a vast and majestic demonic aura. The powerful punch had a bit of the charm of Chen Qingdi's one punch to break all things. It directly included the few people present and the hungry ghost in his attack range. When everyone present saw this scene, they all cursed inwardly at Chu Xiu for being a lunatic. They all dodged, allowing Chu Xiu to smash the hungry ghost into pieces. After killing dozens of such hungry ghosts in succession, Chu Xiu's mental strength had skyrocketed. It could be said that it far surpassed 90% of the martial Dao masters in the underworld. However, although his mental strength had skyrocketed, Chu Xiu discovered a problem. The mental strength he obtained by killing these hungry ghosts did not actually merge with his original mental strength. Instead, it existed in his primordial spirit alone. It was not transparent, but black-gray. It even dyed Chu Xiu's primordial spirit black. However, this black mental strength was no different from the mental strength that Chu Xiu cultivated himself, and there were no side effects. However, Chu Xiu had a feeling that this mental strength should have another use, but he had not figured it out yet. At this time, the glazed golden silk goo attached to Chu Xiu's heart had also undergone some changes. After devouring the black liquid, the glazed golden silk goo's body had grown a size. Originally, the appearance of the glazed golden silk goo was just a slightly cute and chubby golden silkworm. However, there was a black line on the back of the golden silkworm, giving it a slightly evil feeling. However, the glazed golden silk goo's strength was clearly growing. At this moment, the glazed golden silk goo also released a rhythm, pointing at the hungry ghost youth. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. He knew what the glazed golden thread goo wanted to do, but to kill the young man who had turned into a hungry ghost and devour the black juice in his brain, that was a little difficult. The strength of the hungry ghost youth was not low previously. His initial estimation was that he was an expert who condensed the martial Dao true core. Now that he had turned into a hungry ghost, his body's defense was extremely shocking. He could even block the white tiger deity wind. It would be very difficult for him to kill him. Most importantly, Daoist Guangning and the other 2 were working together to besiege him. If Chu Xiu wanted to seize the initiative and kill him, it would be quite difficult. However, Chu Xiu could not care about other things for the time being. He directly rushed towards the hungry ghost youth and said, "Guys, let me help you." Previously, Daoist Guangning and the other 2 had already noticed that Chu Xiu had helped everyone to kill the hungry ghost. They were also somewhat puzzled about what Lin Yi was thinking. However, they were having a hard time fighting here, so they did not have the time to care so much. But now, Lin Yi actually came to help them. This action was really puzzling to everyone present. If it wasn't for Lin Ye's ruthlessness and decisiveness when he killed the 3 Chunyang Dao sect disciples, they might really believe that although Lin Yi was from the demonic path, he was somewhat kind-hearted. But now they all thought that Lin Ye's behavior was definitely strange, but they did not refuse. The hungry ghost youth was very difficult to deal with. On the other hand, Lin Ye's strength was obvious. His explosive power was already comparable to a martial Dao grandmaster, so he could share some of the pressure. When Chu Xiu went forward to fight with the hungry ghost youth, he felt that the other party was difficult to deal with. With a punch, he could only push the other party back a few steps. The powerful prison-guarding Wisdom King form landed, but it was forcibly torn apart by the other party. It did not have any effect at all. After fighting for a long time, Xiaofan could not help but say, "I say, kid, if you don't use the 7 sabers behind you now, when will you use them? Aren't those 7 sabers divine weapons? This guy's physical defense is amazing. He can defend against precious weapons, but I don't believe that he can also defend against divine weapons. If you don't want to use them, then give them to me and let me use them." Chapter 564. Yu Qifeng seemed to be a straightforward person, but in fact, he was full of schemes. The 7 sabers on Chu Xiu's back were said to be divine weapons that had once injured Su Xing. Yu Qifeng had long been curious about them. At this moment, he also wanted to see how powerful these divine weapons were and whether they were real or fake. However, Yu Qifeng was cunning, and Chu Xiu was not stupid. He laughed coldly and said, "Senior Yu Qi, have you not heard of the principle of not showing off important weapons? These 7 sabers are my trump cards. If I were to face this thing alone, I would use my sabers. However, now that the 4 of us are attacking together, everyone has a trump card that they haven't used yet. Is it appropriate for a junior like me to use my trump card first?" Yu Qifeng chuckled and did not say anything else. If he continued, he would really think that Chu Xiu was an idiot. Even with 4 against 1, they still could not subdue the ravenous ghost youth. At this moment, Chu Xiu's mental energy suddenly exploded, and he used the soul-calming Hades song. The sound of the zither went straight for the ravenous ghost youth. Amidst the soul-calming music, the ravenous ghost youth's eyes shone with red light. He pounced towards Chu Xiu like a madman, but his speed was much slower. Seeing this, Chu Xiu was immediately shocked. This thing was actually afraid of Essence Soul secret techniques. Actually, Chu Xiu did not use Essence Soul secret techniques at the beginning, because Essence Soul secret techniques were only effective against people. For example, this ravenous ghost youth had already become a half-human half-ghost existence. Chu Xiu was also not sure if Essence Soul secret techniques would be effective against him, so he did not waste his mental energy from the beginning. Unexpectedly, the effect of using Essence Soul secret techniques was better than Chu Xiu had imagined. Seeing this, Chu Xiu hurriedly said, "The 3 of you, as long as you help me hold this guy back, I am confident that I can use Essence Soul secret techniques to kill him." Taoist Guangning and the other 2 looked at each other and nodded. Right now, the 4 of them were working together, but Lin Yi was actually the only one who was proficient in Essence Soul secret techniques, and they were indeed very powerful. Other than that, there was no other way for the time being. Moreover, with the 3 of them present, Lin Yi could forget about playing any tricks. Therefore, when Taoist Guangning and the other 2 heard the command, they immediately used their full strength to stop the young man who had turned into a hungry ghost. Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hands, casting the Heart Demon Rotation Grand Technique and the Soul Extinguishing Grand Technique to the extreme at the same time. Boundless illusions enveloped the hungry ghost youth. Just as Chu Xiu was about to set up the killing formation in the illusory realm, the black mental energy that he had absorbed before suddenly moved. It actually sucked Chu Xiu's own mental energy into the illusory realm. In that instant, Chu Xiu's expression changed abruptly. However, the evolution of his mental strength was too fast. With just a thought, the illusion had already been laid down. Similarly, Chu Xiu had no time to resist. In an instant, he was already in the illusion. The illusion was laid down by Chu Xiu, but now that he was in the illusion, Chu Xiu felt very unfamiliar. Surrounding him were palaces, green trees and flowers, looking extremely beautiful. Chu Xiu took a closer look. Wasn't this the current appearance of the blissful demon palace? It was just that there weren't any flowers or trees. The young man from before came out of one of the palaces with a bamboo flute in his hand. At this moment, he no longer had the ferocious look of a hungry ghost. There was a gentle smile on his face, and even his skin color had returned to normal. Chu Xiu looked at the young man coldly and frowned. "You're the one who pulled me into the illusion? I've underestimated you." The young man shook his head and said, I wasn't the one who pulled you in but you yourself. Because you've devoured too many hungry ghost spirits, and those spirits are from the same source as me, that's why you're here. The art of heart demon rotation you cultivate is actually a secret cultivation method of the blissful demon palace. A few hundred years ago, I can't remember when it was, but at that time, there was also a demonic cultivator who came here and took the art of heart demon rotation from the armory in front of me. He didn't seem to be interested in the other cultivation methods, so he didn't take them. That person cultivated a variety of cultivation methods, very similar to you. Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic, all of them. He was so powerful that it made people tremble. Even in my era, he was an expert who stood at the peak. Chu Xiu's heart stirred, and he said, "That person was Dugu Wei?" Mei Qinglian had once said that Dugu Wei had also entered the Xiaofan heaven and obtained many benefits from it, creating a peerless demonic cultivation method. After the great calamity of the ancient era, there were quite a few powerful figures of the demonic Tao. However, other than Dugu Wei, Chu Xiu couldn't think of anyone else who could be considered a peak expert even in the ancient era. The young man smiled bitterly and shook his head. When that expert came, he didn't see my true self, but the hungry ghost version of me. I'm just a half-human half-ghost thing. How could I be qualified to talk to that expert? So I don't even know that expert's name. Looking at Chu Xiu, the young man said, "You don't have to be wary of me, I'm different from that demon outside. Moreover, since I've awakened, I don't intend to continue living. I just want to find someone to talk to before I die, and I'll give you some things while I'm at it." Chu Xiu asked doubtfully, "You're not the same person as the body outside? Who exactly are you?" The young man spread his hands and said, "I'm Yu Xian, a direct disciple of the blissful demon palace. I'm also an anomaly of the blissful demon palace, and even an abandoned disciple. As for that demon outside, he's indeed me, but also not me. Anyway, it's a long story." Looking at the surrounding palaces and pavilions, Yu Xian sighed. "The hungry ghost Tao's secret art is against the harmony of the world. Do you think my blissful demon palace is very evil?" Chu Xiu said expressionlessly, "I cultivate the demonic path, but also the Buddhist path. The martial path is just a kind of power. The Buddhist path is yang, and the demons are yin. The demonic path doesn't mean that it's inhumane. In any case, I've never heard of any demonic cultivator who became famous in the pugilistic world by slaughtering the innocent. Power is just a method. Those who lose themselves in power for the sake of obtaining power are either lunatics or weaklings. Those who take the initiative to refine this hungry ghost incarnation, rather than calling them devils, it would be better to call them demons." Yu Xian smiled bitterly and said, "That's right. They disregard everything for the sake of obtaining power, but in fact, they've already lost themselves in power. You're not a martial artist from the ancient times, so you don't know how powerful the Six Paths Demon Venerable was, and how amazing he was. His Six Paths Incarnation secret art is also a fusion of the Taoist, Buddhist, and demonic scriptures. His strength is even second to the demonic path supreme expert who entered here hundreds of years ago. Once he's able to refine the Six Paths Incarnation, he might really be able to rival that demonic path supreme expert. However, the Six Paths Demon Venerable was too overboard, so all the experts in the pugilistic world joined forces to besiege him. Not just the righteous path, but even the demonic path. Because the Six Paths Demon Venerable wanted to refine the Azura Incarnation, he once slaughtered the demonic path. Many people died in that battle, including the Six Paths Demon Venerable, but the Hungry Ghost Tao's secret art was obtained by my blissful demon palace. I suggested Master to destroy the secret art, but more people wanted to refine the Hungry Ghost Tao's incarnation in secret. Because in that battle, even a half-finished Hungry Ghost Tao's incarnation caused great damage to those who participated in that battle. Because they saw the power and terror of the Hungry Ghost Tao's incarnation, they desired that power even more. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "So in the end, they didn't listen to you?" Yu Xian nodded with a bitter smile and said, "Yes, Master didn't listen to me, and almost no one else supported me. They didn't want to destroy such a powerful secret art, so they secretly refined the Hungry Ghost Tao's incarnation. As for me, because I tried to persuade them many times, even Master started to hate it. As a punishment, I even had to feed the hungry ghost, staying with the things I hated the most all day long." Chu Xiu said lightly, "But in the end, you chose to become a hungry ghost, an existence like those monsters. There were no saints in this world, And Chu Xiu did not believe that there were saints in this world. Everyone had their own selfish desires. Even Master Tam Yuan, who had once imparted the sun-changing art to Chu Xiu, had walked step by step from an ordinary monk to a holy monk. Yu Xian was a person of the demonic path. No matter how kind he was, it was impossible for him to be so innocent. The bitter smile on Yu Xian's face deepened. He said in a self-deprecating manner, "Yes, I'm actually afraid of death. I regret it now. If I hadn't disobeyed Master back then, I wouldn't have ended up like this. I thought they would come back for me, but they didn't. The Bliss Demon Palace's array formation was sealed, and I couldn't get out. If I wanted to live, I could only think of other ways. Transforming into a hungry ghost would make me immortal for thousands of years. Coupled with sufficient blood and sleep, living for 10,000 years wouldn't be a problem. It was just a momentary lapse of thought that led me down the path of evil. After becoming a hungry ghost, I was no longer me. My intelligence was gradually eroded, and in the end, I split into another hungry ghost personality. My original self could only hide in the depths of my soul. If you hadn't used your essence soul secret technique to completely invade my mind, I probably wouldn't have the chance to see a living person for the rest of my life. I've always been very afraid of death, but only now do I know that what's more terrifying than death is living a life worse than death. Your essence soul secret technique has actually severely injured the hungry ghost personality. I've also temporarily obtained the rights to manage this body. I'll end my own life in a while, but this is a joyous occasion. I'm finally free. As a token of my gratitude, I'll give you something." "What is it?" Chu Xiu asked. Yu Xian said in a deep voice, "The Hungry Ghost Tao's incarnation. A true incarnation of the Hungry Ghost Tao, and also the last incarnation of the Hungry Ghost Tao in this world." Chu Xiu raised his brows and said, "It's this thing that caused you to become like this, and you still want to give it to me now? However, I don't want to become like you. I don't mind being a demon, but at the same time, I want to be a human." Yu Xian shook his head and said, "What harmed me was not the Hungry Ghost Tao's secret technique, but human greed. Furthermore, the true Hungry Ghost Tao's secret technique only refines an incarnation, and not your original body that's neither human nor ghost like me. Those hungry ghosts and ferocious creatures in the outside world, as well as my original body, are actually just half-finished products." Chapter 565. No one had actually seen what the Hungry Ghost Tao incarnation looked like, as even the Six Paths Demon Lord had never successfully refined it. Yu Xian stared at Chu Xiu and said, "The essence of the Hungry Ghost Tao incarnation lies in devouring its own kind, and finally turning yourself into the strongest hungry ghost, becoming the true Hungry Ghost Tao that devours everything. Although you're not a hungry ghost, there's a strange thing in your body that can digest the soul blood of hungry ghosts, and even devour their mental strength. You've already digested the soul blood, so you can't condense a hungry ghost Tao with a physical body. However, you can sacrifice your mental strength to the Hungry Ghost Tao and make it yours. You've already killed all the hungry ghosts here, and you've condensed enough soul blood of hungry ghosts. The reason why it hasn't evolved into the true Hungry Ghost Tao is because you haven't integrated the true Hungry Ghost Tao's secret technique into your body. I'll give it to you later, but I'll only give you the method to condense the Hungry Ghost Tao, not the method to refine these hungry ghosts and the most crucial formation patterns. From now on, you'll be the first possessor of the Hungry Ghost Tao in this world, but at the same time, you'll be the last possessor of the Hungry Ghost Tao in this world." With that, Yu Xian raised the bamboo flute in his hand and wanted to blow it, sending Chu Xiu out of the illusion. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Wait, I still have a question for you." Yu Xian was stunned. "What is it? What exactly was the great ancient calamity?" This question had been bothering Chu Xiu for a long time. It could be said that everyone in the pugilistic world wanted to know. Shui Wuxiang and the others had been sealed before the great ancient calamity, so they didn't know anything about it at all. However, Yu Xian was someone from the end of the great ancient era, so he definitely knew about it. In the end, Yu Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I really don't know. Before the great calamity of ancient times started, I heard some rumors, but I was imprisoned because I disobeyed my master. I was punished to feed those hungry ghosts. I was expelled from the center of the blissful demon palace, and they didn't tell me anything. When the great ancient calamity began, I had already transformed into a hungry ghost and was in a deep slumber. By the time I woke up, the great ancient calamity had already ended. Everywhere was desolate, and the space where the Bliss Demon Palace resided had even been severed. Actually, I really want to know what happened back then. Chu Xiao furrowed his brows tightly. Things were stuck here again. It was really depressing. By the way, do you know the names of the 3 Pristines Temple and the Lingbao Temple? Yu Xian was stunned and said, "Of course I know. The 3 Pure Palace is the supreme of the Tao sect. The cultivation of the 3 great celestial venerables already stands at the pinnacle of the Jianghu, transcending mortality and entering sainthood, like immortals and gods. The Lingbao Temple is one of the 3,000 Tao sects. Although they don't have many people, they are extremely powerful. The Lingbao Temple's secret technique, the Lingbao Light, is said to be able to destroy any divine weapon. None of the disciples from the Lingbao Temple are mediocre. The temple master of the Lingbao Temple, Immortal Linggu, is one of the rare powerhouses in the world. Although he keeps a low profile, his cultivation is close to the 3 great celestial venerables. He has condensed 360 Lingbao lights in his true martial core, and divine weapons and sharp divine weapons are like scrap iron in front of him." Chu Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that his previous guess was correct. The 3 Pristines Palace was extraordinarily powerful, and that seemingly small Taoist temple was actually a well-known existence in ancient times. Chu Xiao still wanted to say something, but Yu Xian's expression changed slightly at this moment. "There's not much time left. If we delay any longer, then my hungry ghost personality will awaken." As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Xian played the bamboo flute in his hand. The illusion in front of him was destroyed, and Chu Xiao returned to reality in an instant. In the illusion, Chu Xiao and Yu Xian talked for a long time. However, that was in the illusory world of mental power. In the real world, only an instant had passed. On the other side, Taoist Guangning and the other 2 were still attacking the hungry ghost Yu Xian. Because of Chu Xiao's secret technique, Yu Xian was forced to retreat step by step. However, at this moment, Yu Xian's eyes revealed a trace of clarity. The corpse qi around him burned wildly, and he charged towards Chu Xiao at the cost of his origin energy. If Taoist Guangning and the others wanted to block this level of power, they would definitely be injured. Therefore, other than Taoist Guangning, who subconsciously used the yin-yang duality sword formation to block and failed, the other 2 actually dodged immediately. They thought that this hungry ghost Yu Xian hated Chu Xiao to the core. Therefore, he didn't even care about his origin energy to kill Chu Xiao. In the face of such a desperate existence, Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming certainly didn't want to forcefully block it. Even if Chu Xiao was killed later, the monster's vitality would certainly be greatly damaged. Anyway, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Yu Xian's body that was burning with endless corpse qi arrived in front of Chu Xiao. His eyes revealed a trace of relief, and his body suddenly exploded. A drop of extremely dense black soul blood integrated into Chu Xiao's body. Actually, Chu Xiao was still a little vigilant at the beginning. This Yu Xian said a lot, but in fact, Chu Xiao was still half believing and half doubting. He was a suspicious person to begin with. Even if it was those Buddhist monks from the righteous path, Chu Xiao wouldn't completely believe them. Not to mention Yu Xian, who was from the demonic path. Therefore, from the beginning, Chu Xiao gathered all of his mental strength. Once he felt something was wrong, he would immediately expel that drop of soul blood from his body. Moreover, Chu Xiao had another layer of insurance, and that was the glass golden thread gu. The glass golden thread gu only had instincts and didn't have intelligence. Therefore, it would naturally reject any malicious things that entered Chu Xiao's body. Chu Xiao's body was equivalent to the glass golden thread gu's home. In his own home, he wouldn't allow any malicious things to exist. However, contrary to Chu Xiao's expectations, this Yu Xian really didn't do anything to the soul blood. He simply wanted to be free, and before he was free, he wanted to give Chu Xiao, the person who accompanied him on his last journey, a gift. That drop of extremely dense soul blood integrated into Chu Xiao's primordial spirit. However, this time, the soul blood wasn't devoured by the glass golden thread gu. That drop of extremely dense soul blood integrated into one with the black mental strength that Chu Xiao obtained from killing the hungry ghost. In the end, it turned into the appearance of a ferocious hungry ghost. This ravenous ghost's appearance was slightly different from the ravenous ghosts that Chu Xiao had killed earlier. Although the general appearance was the same, with a large head, mouth and swollen abdomen, its skin was pitch black, and it gave off an extremely sinister aura. Moreover, the hungry ghost's head had a pair of sharp horns that were as black as ink, which made the hungry ghost's appearance even more ferocious. At the same time, a piece of information appeared in Chu Xiu's mind. It was a method to use the hungry ghost Dao incarnation, but it didn't include the method to refine the hungry ghost Dao incarnation. In fact, what Chu Xiu currently possessed wasn't a complete hungry ghost Dao incarnation, because it only had a spirit and not a powerful body. However, this didn't matter to Chu Xiu. Even if Yu Xian gave Chu Xiu the method to create the hungry ghost Dao incarnation, Chu Xiu wouldn't use such a method that went against the harmony of heaven and was laborious and unrewarding. Just look at what happened to the demon lord of 6 paths in the past. He was truly angered by both humans and gods, and he was killed by the combined forces of Taoism, Buddhism, and demon Dao. At this moment, Chu Xiu also looked at Yu Qifeng and the other two, and sneered, "The 3 of you dodged really fast." Yu Qifeng and the others had never thought that the fellow would be so useless when he had already begun to burn his origin energy. He seemed like he was about to throw his life on the line. He had already begun to burn his origin energy, but who would have thought that he would be so useless? He had actually used up all of his origin energy and self-destructed. However, apart from Taoist Guangning, who was a little guilty, Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming seemed to be indifferent. Having cultivated to their level and status, most of them had gathered the 2 characteristics of being shameless and being shameless. In a situation where there were benefits or danger, it was fine to be a little shameless. In the outside world, it was fine to be a little shameless in public. After all, they had to protect their dignity as martial Dao masters and the sect behind them. However, given the situation just now, it was better for them to be a little shameless. Taoist Guangning coughed and changed the topic. "Now that the monster is dead, the blissful demon palace should be safe. We just need to be careful of the formation. Everyone, let's do it. Let's see what good stuff is left in the blissful demon palace." Previously, they thought that the blissful demon palace was not damaged. But now, it seemed that the blissful demon palace was still damaged. It was just that the monster had repaired it after the great ancient calamity. Therefore, most of the good stuff in the blissful demon palace had probably been damaged. This was not good news. However, just as everyone was about to start plundering the blissful demon palace, there was a commotion from behind. More than 10 martial artists entered one after another, and there were even martial Dao master-level energy waves. Yu Qifeng's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Taoist Guangning and said in a low voice, "Old Taoist, you didn't reseal the formation?" Generally speaking, for a relic like this that was sealed by an array formation, the people who had entered before would definitely seal the array formation directly after entering. Otherwise, if the things that they had painstakingly obtained were stolen by others, wouldn't that be bad luck? Therefore, Yu Qifeng thought that Taoist Guangning had resealed the formation. He didn't know much about formations, so he thought that Taoist Guangning had already done so long ago. Taoist Guangning glared at him and said, "I can reseal other formations, but this blissful demon palace's formation is very complete. It's completely different from the current formation. If I want to reseal it, it will take me a day. Can you afford to wait?" Chapter 566. Taoist Guangning and the other 2 were the first to discover the blissful demon palace. It was also them who had gone through many battles to resolve the crisis. In the end, those who came later didn't encounter any danger, but now they were here to share their gains. Whether it was Yu Qifeng, Taoist Guangning, or even the other martial artists, they were naturally unhappy. Seeing that the 2 were about to quarrel, Huangfu Weiming said in a deep voice, "Both of you, we discovered the blissful demon palace first. Now that someone is here to rob us, we should join forces to resist the enemy. After that, we'll split the things in the blissful demon palace equally. How about it?" Yu Qifeng and Taoist Guangning looked at each other and nodded. Huangfu Weiming turned his gaze to Chu Xiu and said, "Young friend Lin, it was just a misunderstanding before. Now that someone is here to rob us, you shouldn't be willing to just give up the things to others, right? How about you join us?" They had seen Chu Xiu's strength, and it was indeed amazing. Even if he didn't use the 7 sabers behind him, his strength was enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with most martial arts masters. If they were to join forces with Chu Xiu, they definitely wouldn't be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, A martial artist in a golden robe with a square and dignified face walked out from behind. Seeing that middle-aged man, Huangfu Weiming immediately thought that it was a close call. This middle-aged man was none other than Xiahou Zhan, the family leader of the Xiahou clan. Among the many martial arts masters, Xiahou Zhan was considered one of the more difficult to deal with. His spirit secret technique could catch people off guard, and the Xiahou clan's imperial spirit technique was considered one of the best spirit secret techniques. Once a conflict broke out, Xiahou Zhan could use the imperial spirit technique to fish in troubled waters and obtain many good things from them. However, they still had Lin Yi on their side. Lin Ye's mental strength wasn't inferior to a martial arts master's, and his demonic lineage's spirit secret technique wasn't weak either. They could completely restrain Xiahou Zhan. But at this time, Huangfu Weiming suddenly thought of something. It seemed that Lin Yi and Xiahou Zhan had a feud. The first time Lin Yi appeared in the underworld, he killed Xiahou Zhan's son, Xiahou Wujiang. Although Xiahou Zhan didn't only have Xiahou Wujiang as his only son, he was Xiahou Wujiang, who was once ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. He was also a disciple that Xiahou Zhan had painstakingly nurtured. In the end, he was killed by Lin Yi. As expected, Xiahou Zhan's eyes reddened the moment he saw Chu Xiu. He shouted angrily, "Lin Yi!" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "So it's Patriarch Xiahou. Long time no see. Are you here to avenge your son's death?" Xiahou Zhan gritted his teeth and said, "Not only did you kill my son, but several elites of the Xiahou clan also died in your hands. Even if you are the successor of Dugu Weiwei, I must tear you into pieces today." Previously at the Lingbao Temple, Chu Xiu had also killed several people from the Xiahou clan and the Lu clan. However, Chu Xiu didn't destroy the corpses, so he wasn't afraid of others finding out. Anyway, his identity as Lin Yi was used as a scapegoat. Killing one person was killing, and killing a group of people was also killing. There was no difference. When the surrounding people heard that Chu Xiu had killed the warriors of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan, they immediately looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look. Could it be that this fellow has some deep enmity with the Xiahou clan? Why did he always pick on the Xiahou clan? Not only did he kill Xiahou Wujiang, the most outstanding disciple of the Xiahou clan in this generation, but he also killed the elites of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan. Those people were the elites cultivated by the Xiahou clan. They were the elites of the next generation, and there might even be a martial Dao grandmaster among them. In the end, all of them had been wiped out by Lin Yi. The grudge between them was huge. Of course, this was indeed the case. Xiahou Zhan was really furious at this time. After Xiahou Wujiang was killed, although he didn't go crazy to the extent of qi deviation like Nieren Long, he also used the power of the Xiahou clan to search for Lin Yi frantically, wanting to avenge his son. In the end, after searching for a few months, Lin Yi seemed to have disappeared from the world and never appeared in Jianghu. It was the same when Xiahou Zhan went to investigate Lin Ye's history. This guy seemed to have jumped out of a crack in a stone. Apart from knowing that he had a close relationship with the Phaseless Demon Sect and the Yin Demon Sect, there was no trace at all. In the end, Xiahou Zhan could only give up. After all, he was the family leader of the Xiahou clan, and the elders of the Xiahou clan wouldn't allow him to focus on these things. This time when Xiaofan opened, Xiahou Zhan was actually prepared to kill Lin Yi. Since Lin Yi was an elite cultivated by the Yinma clan, he would definitely come when Xiaofan opened. If Lin Yi didn't have any demonic experts protecting him, Xiahou Zhan would definitely kill him to avenge his son. As for whether it would attract the revenge of the demonic experts, Xiahou Zhan wasn't worried at all. In this Jianghu, there was never a rule that only you can kill, and others can't kill you. Although Xiahou Zhan didn't know who was backing Lin Yi, the Xiahou clan had been one of the 9 great clans for so many years, so it wasn't like they didn't have any trump cards. Moreover, Lin Yi was from the demonic path. Once a demonic expert pressured the Xiahou clan could also ask for help from the Ying clan of Shongshui. Although the 9 great clans weren't very harmonious, they could still maintain an attitude of cooperation in the face of external enemies. If even the Ying clan of Shongshui couldn't stop them, there were still other orthodox sections. Now that the demonic Dao was faintly showing signs of recovery, the righteous Dao sects in the Jianghu didn't want to give the demonic Dao sects even the slightest chance. If the demonic Dao really dared to threaten the Xiahou clan's connections in the Jianghu wouldn't be helpless. However, The only thing Xiaofan didn't expect was that before he could kill Lin Yi would actually kill all the elite disciples of the Xiahou clan who had entered Xiaofan Tian first. How despicable! Just as Xiaofan was about to make a move, another old Taoist entered the blissful devil palace. This person was Zhan Yongzi of the Chunyang Dao sect. Behind him was a young Taoist who was the last surviving young martial art practitioner of the Chunyang Dao sect. Zhan Yongzi's temper wasn't very good to begin with. At this moment, his face was as gloomy as water, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Looking around, Zhan Yongzi bellowed angrily, "Who killed the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect?" Outside the valley, the corpses of the 3 disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect were still placed there. The Chunyang Dao sect had always put in a lot of effort to nurture disciples. A few years ago, one of their most outstanding disciples had just been killed. Now, another one had died. How could Zhan Yongzi accept this? There were some disciples who were also from the Taoist sects but didn't belong to the 3 major Taoist sects. They pointed at Chu Xiao and said, "Senior Zhan Yongzi, this is the person who killed the 3 junior brothers of the Chunyang Dao sect." Compared to Xiaofan, Zhan Yongzi was much more agile. At the moment when he turned his gaze to Chu Xiao, Zhan Yongzi didn't say a word. The sword in his hand was ignited with pure yang qi, and he slashed straight at Chu Xiao. Even if Chu Xiao didn't kill the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect, Zhan Yongzi would kill Chu Xiao if he met him. Not to mention that Chu Xiao already had a deep hatred with the Chunyang Dao sect. Zhan Yongzi didn't need to say those ruthless words to tear Chu Xiao into pieces. His actions had already proved everything. The pure yang sword aura that was as vast and hot as the sun slammed down, bringing pressure to Chu Xiao like Mount Tai. It was extremely powerful. Previously in the outside world, Zhan Yongzi was at a disadvantage when facing Yun Zhongjuan. But in fact, that was because Yun Zhongjuan's strength was too strong. Zhan Yongzi was definitely at the top among the martial Dao masters of the real pellet state. At least, he was the strongest among the martial Dao masters that Chu Xiao had fought with. Chu Xiao made a gesture, and the Hell Guardian Wisdom King image appeared behind Chu Xiao. The Wisdom King's palm slammed down, suppressing the world. At the same time, it also wanted to suppress Zhan Yongzi's pure yang sword aura. However, the power of Zhan Yongzi's pure yang sword aura was simply beyond Chu Xiao's expectations. The Hell Guardian Wisdom King image was almost shattered in an instant. The sword aura fell, and the pure yang aura illuminated the world. Everything within 1,000 meters was shrouded by the hot pure yang aura. Even if Chu Xiao used the heaven sun gazing at air technique, all he could see was a vast expanse of whiteness. There were flaws everywhere, but even the weakest point was not easily broken by the current Chu Xiao. Taking a deep breath, Chu Xiao's body suddenly exuded a strong corpse aura. The hungry ghost soul in Chu Xiao's spirit was released by Chu Xiao. In an instant, the palm-sized soul began to devour Chu Xiao's mental power and aura crazily. It grew to more than 100 meters in size. As it opened its mouth, demonic qi and corpse aura burst out, but it was not to resist, but to wrap and devour. The seemingly majestic pure yang aura was directly devoured by the hungry ghost incarnation, and the hungry ghost incarnation even pounced at Zhan Yongzi. It opened its mouth and devoured everything. Wherever it passed, even the aura of heaven and earth was tainted by the corpse aura, and it was finally devoured. What kind of monster is this? Zhan Yongzi snorted and formed a seal. Boundless aura condensed into runes that circulated in front of him. As Zhan Yongzi stabbed out with his sword, the runes seemed to materialize and condensed on his Dao sword. As his sword slashed down, the 100-meter-long sword aura seemed as though it was going to slash through the heavens and earth, directly slashing the hungry ghost incarnation into pieces. Zhan Yongzi only felt that the hungry ghost incarnation was incomparably evil, but at this moment, Daoist Guangning and the other 2 looked at each other with astonishment in their eyes. The thing that Lin Yi had displayed was clearly in the form of the hungry ghost. Although it did not have a physical body, it had the power of the hungry ghost to devour everything. Apart from the 6 Paths Demon Lord, only the blissful demon palace had obtained the hungry ghost incarnation's secret technique. Therefore, it was impossible for Lin Yi to have obtained it from the outside world. Therefore, just a moment ago, they were still racking their brains to kill each other. However, Lin Yi had somehow obtained the opportunity to steal the hungry ghost path's secret technique. Chapter 567. Taoist Guangning and the other two recognized the origin of the Hungry Ghost Path's secret technique. However, the three of them didn't have the intention to make a move. To Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming, killing one was one less. It was already kind of them not to add insult to injury. As for Huangfu Weiming taking the initiative to seek help from Chu Xiu, did he say anything about it? Taoist Guangning wanted to make a move, but of course, it wasn't to help Chu Xiu. Instead, it was to help Zhan Yongzi. After all, the two of them belonged to the same Dao sect. Moreover, the three disciples of Chunyang Dao sect had died in front of his eyes. However, Taoist Guangning could still be considered as a good person. Zhan Yongzi was obviously stronger than Chu Xiu. Seeing that they were working together just now, Guangning didn't add insult to injury. Of course, Chu Xiu had never counted on them. However, after using the Hungry Ghost Path's incarnation to block Zhan Yongzi's sword, Chu Xiu's face that was hidden under the mask was extremely solemn. There was a problem with the Hungry Ghost Path's secret technique that Yu Xian gave him. Actually, it wasn't the Hungry Ghost Path's secret technique that had a problem. It was Chu Xiu's own realm that had a problem. Those who cultivated the Hungry Ghost Path's secret technique, be it the Six Paths Demon Lord or the half-human half-ghost Yu Xian, were actually much stronger than Chu Xiu. Therefore, when Chu Xiu used the Hungry Ghost Path's incarnation, the other party immediately tried to absorb Chu Xiu's mental strength and astral energy. Its greedy, devouring characteristics simply didn't differentiate between friend and foe. If Chu Xiu wasn't careful, the other party could even absorb all of his energy. However, after stepping into the martial master realm, this kind of thing would be slower. Therefore, when Chu Xiu used the Hungry Ghost Path's incarnation, it could be said to be extremely dangerous. Although it didn't consume as much energy as using the Seven Demon Blade, it was still more dangerous. This way, even though Chu Xiu had quite a number of trump cards, the awkward thing was that he basically couldn't use them casually. The pure yang astral energy around Zhan Yongzi burned intensely, as if the sun had descended. Looking at Chu Xiu coldly, Zhan Yongzi said in a cold voice, "You evil brat, you are vicious and merciless. Cultivating these evil cultivation techniques, who knows how many people you have killed. Today, even if I don't avenge my Chunyang Dao sect's disciple, I will kill you and rid the Jianghu of evil." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhan Yongzi made his move again. The sword in his hand split into over 1,000 sword shadows that released boundless pure yang astral energy in the air. In the end, it actually turned into an incomparably majestic sword formation. It turned into a meteor of light that fell from the sky with an incomparably powerful might. On the other side, Xiaofan also moved. He formed a seal with his hand, and golden light shone around him. The boundless power of his soul turned into a storm that swept over with the power of the world. The Xiahou clan's spirit control art used one's soul to control people in the initial stage. However, once it was cultivated to the full mastery stage, it would control the world. Chu Xiu was targeted by two martial Dao grandmasters at the same time. Furthermore, they were powerhouses like Xiaofan and Zhan Yongzi. Even an ordinary martial Dao grandmaster would not be able to withstand them, let alone Chu Xiu's heaven and human oneness. Chu Xiu's hand was on the hatred saber, but his attention was focused on the area behind the blissful demon palace. Be it Xiaofan or Zhan Yongzi, he could barely withstand one of them. Now that there were two of them, Chu Xiu's only way out was to escape. He could only hope that the hatred saber was powerful enough to give him a chance to escape. Just when Chu Xiu was about to attack with his saber, a figure in a black robe came from behind. Boundless, turbulent demon qi shrouded Xiaofan, transforming into countless asuras that danced around him, eroding his will. In an instant, Xiaofan was alarmed. He could no longer care about attacking Chu Xiu. Instead, he condensed all the power of his soul around him, and the endless golden light of his soul shone. Only then did he disperse all the asuras. Sky Demon Formless Technique. It's a demon from the Phaseless Demon Sect. The Phaseless Demon Sect was a large sect of the lurking devil lineage, and they often stirred up trouble. They were quite famous in the underworld. Although Xiaofan had never interacted with the Phaseless Devil Sect before, he had still heard of the Phaseless Devil Sect's Sky Devil Phaseless Mystic Technique. The martial artist from the Phaseless Demon Sect who suddenly attacked was Mr. Liu. At this moment, Mr. Liu had already stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Although he had just stepped into this realm not long ago, his strength was not much weaker than Xiaofan's. They were all martial Dao grandmasters, but some people had different accumulations in the unity of heaven and man realm. Their strength after stepping into the martial Dao grandmaster realm was naturally different. For example, people like Chu Xiao and Zhong Xian could compete with martial Dao grandmasters when they were in the unity of heaven and man realm. When they stepped into the martial Dao grandmaster realm, they would naturally be the best among those in the same realm. Mr. Lu was also such an existence. Although he was slightly older than Chu Xiao, Zhong Xian, and the others, his accumulation was also extremely shocking. There were actually not many people who could accumulate such strength in the unity of heaven and man realm. Other than the top 5 on the Longhu leaderboard, among the people that Chu Xiao had met, Mr. Lu was one of them. The former Heavenly Sin branch leader was also one of them. Although the Heavenly Sin branch leader had once tricked Chu Xiao, the other party's strength was indeed strong enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the confidant of the Blue Dragon Society's big dragon head, Bu Tiannan. At this moment, on Chu Xiao's side, Mr. Lu helped Chu Xiao block Xiahou. Seeing this, Chu Xiao immediately let go of the hand that was holding the hatred saber. Instead, his qi and blood burned, and the boundless demonic qi and qi fused into one, turning into an extremely evil demon Buddha of Massacre. The demon Buddha of Massacre held the blood saber in his hand and slashed down. The boundless demonic qi and blood burned and directly broke the pure yang sword formation, causing a series of loud explosions. Chu Xiao's face was slightly pale. Previously, when he used the demon Buddha of Massacre, he used the demonic blood technique to absorb other people's qi and blood. This time, he used his own qi and blood. Although his strength was slightly stronger, the feeling of using his own qi and blood was not a good feeling. Mr. Lu walked to Chu Xiao's side and sneered at Xiahou and Zhen Yongzi. 2 famous martial Dao grandmasters teamed up to deal with a junior, and you guys have the cheek to call yourselves the righteous path of martial arts. Do you guys still care about the rules? Don't you have any shame? I'm ashamed for you guys. Zhan Yongzi said coldly, why do we need to care about the rules of the pugilistic world with you demons? Are you even worthy to talk about the rules of the pugilistic world? Zhan Yongzi's words were extremely overbearing and unreasonable. Mr. Lu sneered and said, good, good, good. As expected of the so-called righteous sections. This shamelessness is something our demonic path can't compare to. Mr. Lu turned his head and transmitted his voice to Chu Xiao. I say, you're really good at stirring up trouble. How long has it been and you've already provoked 2 guys that you can't afford to offend? Chu Xiao spread his hands helplessly and said, Xiahou is an old grudge. However, you also know the Chunyang Dao sect's character. They have a foul mouth. If they want to kill me, I can't just let them kill me, right? Mr. Lu transmitted his voice secretly. Later, I'll hold Xiahou back. You find a chance to escape. This time in Xiaofan, the number of people from the demonic path is not as many as the righteous path. Especially the people from the hidden devil lineage. Many people did not come due to various reasons. At the very least, we can't find any reinforcements in the surroundings. Chu Xiao nodded. He was not an idiot. Of course, he knew when to fight head-on and when to escape. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Xiahou teamed up with Zhan Yongzi. Even if Mr. Lu intervened, the situation was still very bad. Mr. Lu's black robe fluttered, and a surging demonic qi burst out. He looked at Mayor Xiahou and smiled. I've long heard that the Xiahou clan's imperial spirit technique is unparalleled in the world. I don't know how it compares with my phaseless demon sect's demonic formless technique. Bullying the younger generation is nothing. Patriarch Xiahou, your opponent is me. Xiahou sneered. You're just a nobody who has just stepped into the real pellet state. If it was your phaseless demon sect Situ Li who said that, you think you're worthy? Mr. Lu squinted his eyes and said, you'll know whether I'm worthy or not later. As soon as he said that, the boundless demonic qi around Mr. Lu roared and surged. The black demonic qi evolved into a demonic flame shura, which appeared behind Mr. Lu. Using his palm as a blade, Mr. Lu slashed forward, and the demonic flame shura behind him also slashed. In an instant, the demonic qi affected heaven and earth. Xiahou body suddenly fell into boundless darkness. He couldn't see the slightest light, but he could feel the powerful blade filled with demonic qi. True and false, false and real. The demonic formless technique was both real and illusory. Everyone cultivated it in a different way. The demonic formless technique that Mr. Liu cultivated was a combination of illusion and flesh, shattering the soul. Xiaofan was also a famous martial Dao master for a long time, so he naturally wouldn't be defeated so easily by Mr. Liu. No matter what, I'll break it with my own strength. Specks of golden divine light gathered around Xiaofan's body. His primordial spirit affected heaven and earth, turning into a storm. As Xiaofan punched out, the energy storm tore apart the sky and the earth, tearing apart the boundless darkness. Between Xiaofan and Mr. Liu, one had a foundation, while the other had talent. Therefore, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. As for Zhen Yongzi, he didn't say anything and released the pure yang sword aura, directly attacking Chu Xiu. A fierce look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. The demonic flames around him were monstrous, but he didn't retreat. All the demonic qi and killing intent around him gathered together, and he used the annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. At the same time, the fist aura also carried a powerful aura that could destroy all laws, and the fist intent was unparalleled. The killing fist collided with the pure yang sword aura. The blazing pure yang sword aura was the best at restraining attributes such as demonic qi and demonic qi. Not to mention that Chu Xiu's strength was weaker than Zhen Yongzi's. So under the collision, Chu Xiu's fist intent shattered, and the pure yang sword aura entered his body, causing Chu Xiu to spit out a mouthful of blood. However, after the blood was spat out, it burned intensely, rapidly turning into a layer of blood mist that condensed around Chu Xiu's body, causing his speed to increase drastically. He bypassed Zhen Yongzi and appeared beside the last young warrior from Chunyang Dao sect. The annihilating heaven and earth annihilating soul-shifting technique was used. Before the young warrior from Chunyang Dao sect could say a word, he was already completely under Chu Xiu's control. Chu Xiu grabbed the neck of the warrior from Chunyang Dao sect with his hand, which was tainted with demonic qi, and said to Zhen Yongzi with a sinister smile, "Old fart, don't you want to kill me? If you aren't afraid that the young elites of Chunyang Dao sect will be annihilated, then kill me." Chapter 568. In Zhen Yongzi's mind, when a junior from the diabolism like Lin Yi encountered him, the only choice he could make was to flee like a rat and do his best to snatch a chance of survival from his hands. This was already not easy. Zhen Yongzi had never expected that Lin Yi would be so daring as to do the opposite, and even threaten a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. Pointing at Chu Xiu, Zhen Yongzi's hand trembled in anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Using a junior as a threat? You demons from the diabolism are always so despicable and shameless. Let go of Ning Zhen. Otherwise, the Chunyang Dao sect will definitely use all the strength of the entire sect to make you die a graveless death." Chu Xiu sneered and said, "I'm despicable and shameless to attack a junior. Don't forget, in terms of seniority, I'm the same as this little Taoist. Why didn't you call me despicable and shameless when you two seniors besieged me just now? Didn't you talk about the rules? So, your so-called rules are only for me?" Zhen Yongzi was instantly speechless. In fact, everyone present felt the same. Based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed just now, everyone subconsciously did not treat him as a junior martial artist. Instead, they regarded him as a martial Dao grandmaster. Holding the neck of the little Taoist, Ning Zhen, Chu Xiu said faintly, "All right, don't talk so much. Old thing, retreat 5 kilometers and I'll let this kid live. Otherwise, the Chunyang Dao sect will really have no one in the next generation." The disciple that the Chunyang Dao sect had previously cultivated had been killed by Li Feilian. This had already caused some damage to the Chunyang Dao sect. After all, with the harsh cultivation method of the Chunyang Dao sect, it was not easy to cultivate such a young martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. However, although that person was dead, Chunyang Dao sect still had some foundation. These 4 were the more outstanding ones among the younger generation of Chunyang Dao sect. However, if the 4 of them were to die, Chunyang Dao sect would not only have no one in the younger generation, but it could also be said that there were not many outstanding ones. They could only choose the best among the dwarves. This was not good news for the next generation of Chunyang Dao sect. A conflicted look appeared on Zhen Yongzi's face. With his temper, he would definitely exterminate all of these demons. He would even sacrifice his own people for that. But for the sake of the sect, he couldn't bring himself to be so ruthless. After a while, Zhen Yongzi said coldly, "What if I withdraw, but you kill Ning Zhen?" I don't dare to believe the words of you people from the devil Dao, nor will I believe them. Chu Xiu said faintly, Don't worry, I, Chu Xiu, am a man of my word. I will never lie to you. Don't think that I'm from the devil Dao. My words are much more trustworthy than your so-called righteous martial arts world. Zhen Yongzi's face was as gloomy as water. He snorted coldly and said, All right, I'll believe you this time. If anything happens to Ning Zhen, I'll definitely tear you into pieces. Just as Zhen Yongzi was about to leave, Ning Zhen, who had been controlled by Chu Xiu's soul-shifting technique, was struggling in Chu Xiu's hands. The scorching pure yang energy burned continuously along with his qi and blood. Ning Zhen had actually relied on his subconscious to burn his own qi and blood to break free from Chu Xiu's soul-shifting technique. Chu Xiu's mental energy was now far greater than most martial Dao masters. If Ning Zhen wanted to break free from the soul-shifting technique's control, he had no other choice but to fight with his life. Even Chu Xiu hadn't expected such a violent move. He had actually managed to break through the shackles of his spiritual power in a split second. Ning Zhen shouted at Zhen Yongzi, Uncle Master, there's killing intent in his spiritual will. He's lying to you. Don't worry about me. Kill this devil Dao. Before Ning Zhen could finish speaking, the demonic qi in Chu Xiu's hands exploded. He exerted force and instantly broke Ning Zhen's neck. Throwing Ning Zhen's corpse aside, Chu Xiu shook his head helplessly and said, Why bother? Isn't it good to be a little muddle-headed? At least you can die more comfortably. Ning Zhen was right. Chu Xiu was lying to Zhen Yongzi. He had killed 3 disciples of Chunyang Dao sect. Whether he killed one more or one less, it made no difference to Chu Xiu. Since there was enmity, he had to kill all the other parties' future hopes. However, the only thing Chu Xiu did not expect was that this disciple of Chunyang Dao sect had such a violent personality. Looking at Chu Xiu, Zhen Yongzi's eyes turned red. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Countless blood mist condensed into runes in mid-air and attached to the Dao sword in his hand. At the same time, the extreme pure yang astral energy gathered around Zhen Yongzi. It was compressed to the extreme and condensed on the Dao sword. In an instant, the Dao sword was like the descending sun, shining brightly. Dang! Zhen Yongzi slashed down and the Dao sword flew out of his hand. A wave of killing intent condensed and locked onto Chu Xiu. It was the demon-subduing Dao pattern carved with Zhen Yongzi's blood essence. The sword would not return to its scabbard until it drank demonic blood. At that moment, Chu Xiu instantly felt an extreme sense of crisis. The pure yang astral energy on the Dao sword had been compressed and condensed to the extreme. Although it was only a thin layer, it was comparable to the blazing sun. Everywhere it passed, even the essence qi of heaven and earth was burning. This time, Chu Xiu had really infuriated Zhen Yongzi. Even this senior martial Dao master, who had been famous for a long time, was prepared to use a secret technique that would consume his blood essence to kill Chu Xiu. One could imagine how furious Zhen Yongzi was. The heaven's sun gazing at air had been cast to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The dense demonic qi and blood mist was also wrapped around Chu Xiu. Together with the internal binding seal, Chu Xiu's speed had exploded to the extreme, but the effect was minimal. With Chu Xiu's current mental strength that surpassed most martial Dao masters, he could see the trajectory of the Dao sword and dodge it in advance. However, the Dao sword was locked onto him. No matter how many times he dodged, the Dao sword was like a maggot attached to a bone, slashing towards him at high speed. Even if Chu Xiu's speed was a little slower, the scorching pure yang astral energy on the Dao sword would suppress the demonic qi around Chu Xiu and gradually weaken Chu Xiu's power. As a martial Dao master, Zhen Yongzi hated Chu Xiu to the core at this time. He could no longer care about his own reputation or the subsequent fight in Xiaofan. This time, he wanted to exhaust Chu Xiu to death, using his own foundation to exhaust Chu Xiu to death. Even though Chu Xiu's explosive power was comparable to most martial Dao masters, he had not condensed the martial Dao true core yet. After all, he had not condensed the martial Dao true core yet. Every bit of power he used would be less. In the end, the first one who could not hold on would still be him, Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not turn around, but his hand was already on the handle of the hatred saber. However, Chu Xiu was still hesitating. Should he use the 7-demon saber or use the hungry ghost Dao incarnation to fight with his life on the line? At this time, Zhang Yongzi also stared at Chu Xiu with a gloomy expression, focusing all his attention on Chu Xiu. He knew that Chu Xiu had a trump card, and he also knew that Chu Xiu would not give up so easily. Therefore he was also waiting for Chu Xiu to take out all his trump cards and defeat him in one fell swoop, letting him feel what despair was. However, at this moment, Zhang Yongzi's heart skipped a beat. His perception did not actually sense anything. It was just a kind of sixth sense that came to him on a whim. It was a kind of crisis instinct that he had developed after so many years of killing in the underworld. Should he trust his perception or his instinct? At this moment, Zhang Yongzi subconsciously chose the latter. He no longer controlled the principal sword. Instead, with the support of his pure Yang Gang energy, his speed exploded to the extreme and he dodged to the side. At the same time, he formed a seal with his hand, wanting to use a secret technique to defend himself. However, he had only formed half of the seal when a silver flying dagger had already brushed past his body. Zhang Yongzi's incomparably powerful protective gang energy was like air in front of the flying dagger. It had no resistance at all. A silver light flashed and the flying dagger pierced straight into the ground. There was no sound of gang energy exploding, but the flying dagger had already disappeared. Even the crowd's perception could not detect it. One could imagine how deep the flying dagger had pierced into the ground. It had to be at least a few 100 feet deep. "It's you, Li Feilian." Zhang Yongzi suppressed the shock in his heart and looked at a martial artist behind him. The martial artist did not look young or old. He should be in his 30s. His appearance was ordinary, extremely ordinary. He was definitely the kind of person that would not stand out in a crowd. He was wearing an extremely ordinary black robe with a belt casually wrapped around his waist. There were also 9 flying daggers on the belt. Including the previous one, he actually only had a total of 10 daggers. The flying dagger on his waist was very ordinary, just like him. The blade was 7 inches long and the handle was as long as a finger. It seemed to be made of ordinary steel. Although it was shiny, there was not a single pattern on it. It was extremely simple. However, it was such an extremely simple flying dagger that had almost severely injured Zhang Yongzi, a martial Dao master. At this time, when everyone present heard Zhang Yongzi's words, they turned their heads to look at the extremely ordinary man. They could not imagine that this was the former 4th on the Longhu leaderboard and currently ranked 6th, Li Feilian. If Zhang Yongzi did not speak, even if this person was carrying a flying dagger, no one present would have associated him with Li Feilian. Among the top 10 martial artists on the Longhu leaderboard, Li Feilian had made the least attacks. However, he was also the most legendary. He killed 1 person with every strike. The only person he killed with 2 strikes was the genius disciple of the pure Yang Daoist sect of this generation. He had killed one of the important figures of the pure Yang Daoist sect in the future. Hence, he was hunted down by the pure Yang Daoist sect. Li Feilian hadn't appeared in Jianghu for several years. Seeing him at this time, the people present still couldn't believe it. After all, extraordinary people had extraordinary things. In their opinion, a legendary figure like Li Feilian shouldn't be so ordinary. However, Li Feilian was really so ordinary. Chapter 569. Everyone in Jianghu knew about the grudge between Li Feilian and Chunyang Dao sect, but in fact, everyone knew that it was not Li Feilian's fault. Instead, it was Chunyang Dao sect's fault, but they would not say so. As one of the top 10 on the Longhu list, Li Feilian's identity was very mysterious. Even Wind Sweeping Tower had only vaguely dug out some simple information about Li Feilian, but they did not know more details. The news about Li Feilian that Wind Sweeping Tower released to the outside world was very simple. His ancestor was one of the strongest in Jianghu before the great calamity of the ancient times. The flying knife in his hand never missed its target, and it even involved space, karma, and other supreme martial arts. This lineage had always been a single lineage. It was neither righteous, demonic, nor evil. It rarely participated in the disputes in Jianghu, and it was extremely low-key. However, occasionally, a successor would appear, and his strength was extremely strong. Li Feilian's style was the same as his ancestors for many generations. He was also very low-key. In fact, all the people he had killed had taken the initiative to cause trouble for him. He had never caused trouble for anyone else. Li Feilian was not even willing to provoke those ordinary martial arts practitioners, let alone the young geniuses of Chunyang Dao sect. In fact, everyone in Zhonghu knew how Chunyang Dao sect behaved. In everyone's opinion, the reason why Li Failian killed people was probably that the person from Chunyang Dao sect had angered Li Failian, and that was why Li Failian killed people. However, there were many things in Zhonghu that could not be judged based on right or wrong. Even if Li Failian was not wrong, he was the one who killed people, and Chunyang Dao sect wanted to kill him to avenge their disciple. Over the years, Chunyang Dao sect had been tracking down Li Failian's whereabouts, but they had not found him. Li Failian had not appeared in the eyes of Zhonghu people all these years because of the pursuit of Chunyang Dao sect. This was the first time he showed up, and as soon as he appeared, he gave Zhan Yongzi a big gift. In a short period of time, Zhan Yongzi had encountered two of Chunyang Dao sect's biggest enemies. However, before Zhan Yongzi could say anything, Li Failian made another move. Li Failian did not mind that his sneak attack had failed to injure Zhan Yongzi. After all, his flying daggers were not meant for sneak attacks. In an instant, 3 flying daggers flew out of his hands. There was no powerful stellar energy, nor was there any dazzling power. They were just 3 ordinary silver beams of divine light. Zhan Yongzi coldly snorted. At this moment, his Dao sword was slashing towards Chu Xiao, so he did not have a weapon in his hand. However, it did not matter. Zhan Yongzi used his finger as a sword and shot out his pure yang astral energy, turning into a sky full of sword light that blocked in front of him. However, Li Failian's 3 flying daggers underwent a strange change at this moment. In mid-air, the 3 flying daggers were faintly discernible. The void seemed to have been folded, and the dense pure yang sword chi seemed to have pierced into the air. As for the 3 flying daggers, they were locked onto Zhan Yongzi from 3 different directions. This gave Zhan Yongzi a very strange feeling. No matter how he dodged, the 3 flying daggers seemed to be able to hit him. Seeing this scene, everyone present suddenly thought of wind-sweeping buildings' evaluation of Li Failian in the past. This person's martial Dao legacy involved the supreme rules of space and even karma. Currently, in the Zhonghu, there were only 2 young martial artists who were qualified to come into contact with such rules. One was Feng Qishao, and the other was Chu Xiao. These 2 people had once competed in the Dao of Karma on the arena of Floating Jade Mountain, and now Li Failian was the third one. Zhan Yongzi's eyes revealed a strong murderous intent. When it came to enmity with Chunyang Dao sect, Li Failian's was deeper than Chu Xiao's. Li Failian had killed the most outstanding disciple of this generation in Chunyang Dao sect, and Chunyang Dao sect had been hunting Li Failian all over the Zhonghu, forcing Li Failian to not dare to step into the Zhonghu for several years. Now that Li Failian was not dead, Chunyang Dao sect would only have one more enemy at the unity of heaven and man realm. However, with Li Failian's speed of improvement, Chunyang Dao sect would have one more martial Dao grandmaster level enemy in the future. Of course, be it Li Failian or Lin Yi, they were both targets that Zhan Yongzi had to kill. Zhan Yongzi held the demon suppression seal in his hand, and his pure yang energy surged. As the seal fell, it directly enveloped the 3 flying daggers in an attempt to suppress them. However, the strange thing was that there was a wave of fluctuation coming from Li Failian's flying daggers. As the power trembled rapidly, the pure yang energy melted away, unable to block the power of the flying daggers at all. Just now, it was this kind of blade that easily broke through the protective aura of Zhan Yongzi, a martial Dao grandmaster, and almost seriously injured him. Seeing this, Zhan Yongzi knitted his brows tightly. At this moment, the pure yang Dao sword was still fighting with Lin Yi. With the support of the demon suppression Dao pattern, the power of the pure yang Dao sword would not be weakened by much even if he did not use his power for the time being. Right now, Zhan Yongzi did not have a weapon in his hand, so this should be his weakest period. Facing Li Failian's blade that seemed to be unable to defend at all, even Zhan Yongzi felt that it was troublesome. However, Zhan Yongzi was after all a martial Dao grandmaster of the older generation. Even if he did not have a weapon in his hand, he would not be easily forced into a dead end by a junior like Li Failian. When the 3 flying daggers were about to reach him, a golden light surged around Zhan Yongzi's body. It was extremely firm and yang, making Zhan Yongzi look like a golden armored deity. He pointed out with his sword fingers, clashing with 2 of the flying daggers. A powerful force immediately erupted, and the 2 flying daggers were directly shattered by the golden light. At the same time, Zhan Yongzi chanted the demon suppression mantra. Waves of ripples surged in the void, and the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in front of him was constantly vibrating. No matter how the flying daggers changed their laws, their power was completely dispersed, and they directly fell to the ground. Taoist Guangning, who was watching the battle at the side, exclaimed, "It's the Chunyang Dao Sex Yang Extreme Mystic Technique. When did Taoist Zhan Yongzi cultivate this technique?" Everyone knew that the Buddhist golden body was unparalleled in the world, and it was the pinnacle existence of all the body-tempering techniques in the pugilistic world. However, they did not know that the sect also had countless body-tempering techniques. When cultivated to great success, it would not be inferior to the various Buddhist golden bodies. However, the martial artists of the Tao sect preferred peace and inaction. Very few people would choose to cultivate this kind of body-tempering technique, unless they were really good at it. Zhan Yongzi was an old man in the pugilistic world. In fact, he was already close to the stage where his qi and blood were declining. No one would have thought that he would actually spend so much effort to cultivate this kind of body-tempering technique. At this moment, Taoist Guangning was also hesitating. Should he help Zhan Yongzi? If he didn't help, they all belonged to the same lineage of the three great Tao sects. Seeing Zhan Yongzi fighting with his life on the line, Taoist Guangning also couldn't bear to watch. However, if he helped, he would also be tainted with karma. Moreover, this matter had nothing to do with him. Xiaofan, who was at the side, transmitted a message to Taoist Guangning, telling him not to interfere and to calmly watch the development of the matter. On the other hand, at this moment, Zhan Yongzi, who'd blocked 3 of Li Feilian's flying daggers in succession, sneered. However, Li Feilian didn't even bother to speak or ridicule Zhan Yongzi. Instead, he took out a flying dagger and slit it through his meridians. Blood instantly gushed out, but the flying dagger was dyed blood red. 5 flying daggers that were stained with Li Feilian's blood shot out in a straight line towards Zhan Yongzi. The blood red line connected the 5 flying daggers together. Although they seemed to be separated, there was a faint karmic connection between them. The moment the daggers shot out, there was even a faint image of ghosts and gods wailing, causing Zhan Yongzi's primordial spirit to feel a trace of coldness. These 5 daggers didn't just slash at Zhan Yongzi's body. They also slashed at his 3 flowers above the head and the 5 qi in his body. At this moment, Chu Xiu was still entangled with the pure Yang Dao sword. Without Zhan Yongzi's control, a demon-subduing formation that was powered by qi and blood couldn't do anything to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had seen Li Feilian's series of attacks just now. He had to admit that Li Feilian was really a character. He only had 10 sabers. His first sneak attack had failed, and the next 3 had been blocked by Zhan Yongzi. When he attacked again, he used the secret technique of burning his blood essence. He was ready to fight with his life on the line. Li Feilian still had one last dagger in his hand. However, Chu Xiu guessed that the last dagger was Li Feilian's life. Once the dagger was used, he would lose his life. After attacking 3 times, Li Feilian revealed all his trump cards and risked his life. Under Li Feilian's seemingly cold and ordinary appearance, there was an extreme madness hidden. From the moment he appeared until now, Li Feilian didn't even say a word. There was no killing intent or hatred in his eyes when he looked at Zhan Yongzi. It was as if killing Zhan Yongzi was just a mission for him, a stage that he had to go through in life. It was incomparably natural. In the Jianghu, people like Li Feilian were usually ruthless and quiet. People like Li Feilian were the hardest to deal with and the hardest to provoke. A person who could fight to the death with bloodshot eyes was actually not scary. What was scary was people like Li Feilian. He had clearly decided to fight to the death with you, but you still didn't know it and continued to resist calmly. At this moment, Zhan Yongzi was in such a state. Although he wasn't calm, he didn't expect Li Feilian's attacks to be so unpredictable. Just now, he only attacked with 3 daggers to test Zhan Yongzi's strength. Now it was a killing move? The 5 blood daggers didn't just slash at Zhan Yongzi's physical body, but also the 5 qi in his body. Although Zhan Yongzi cultivated the extreme Yang mysterious technique and his physical body wasn't weak, in the face of such a strange attack, it was a pity that it was a little too late even if Zhan Yongzi put on a desperate stance. In the midst of the golden pure Yang qi, Zhan Yongzi's strength was condensed to the extreme. A smear of blood rose and turned into a demon-subduing seal that condensed in his palm. With a palm strike, a flying dagger was directly shattered. It seemed like he had casually shattered the 5 flying daggers, but Zhan Yongzi couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His mysterious technique was broken, and his face turned pale. Although the daggers were shattered, the saber intent slashed into Zhan Yongzi's body without any hindrance and slashed at his internal organs and 5 qi. Chapter 570. Zhan Yongzi was a martial Dao grandmaster of the older generation, yet he was injured by a junior like Li Failian. This was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Although Zhan Yongzi was injured because he was chasing Lin Yi with all his might and did not even have his weapon with him, an injury was an injury. There was no good excuse. When Chu Xiu saw the scene of Zhan Yongzi being injured from behind, his eyes immediately revealed a cold glint. The pure Yang Dao sword was still entangled with Chu Xiu, but in the next moment, the demonic aura around Chu Xiu had already erupted to the extreme, fusing with killing intent and evil spirit. He executed the heaven-extinguishing earth-obliterating selfless killing fist. As the fist landed, an unparalleled fist aura blasted on the pure Yang Dao sword, causing the demon-suppressing Dao pattern on it to tremble and then shatter. A weapon without a master was just an inanimate object. Zhan Yongzi was probably thinking too much if he wanted to rely on an inanimate object to hold him back. Previously, Chu Xiu did not make a move because he wanted to preserve his last bit of strength and wait for an opportunity. Now the opportunity had come. After defeating the pure Yang Dao sword, Chu Xiu's hand was already on the hatred saber as he rushed towards Zhan Yongzi. Seeing that Lin Yi still dared to have any ideas on him, Zhan Yongzi could not help but be enraged. Did the two juniors, Li Failian and Lin Yi, really think that he was a pushover? Powerful and majestic pure yang energy erupted from Zhan Yongzi's body. Even though his internal organs and 5 qis had been injured, the power that erupted in that instant was still shocking to others. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu did not care about Zhan Yongzi's actions at all. He did not attack first, but instead transformed nearly half of his mental strength into the soul-annihilating arrow and shot it with his mind, heading straight for Zhan Yongzi. The soul-annihilating arrow was an incomparably overbearing essence spirit secret technique that followed the path of extreme lethality. It was incomparably ferocious, and there was no other way but to resist it. It was very risky to use the soul-destroying arrow before using the 7 demon swords, but for Chu Xiu, he would only do so if he was at least 60% confident. The invisible arrow brought with it a majestic pressure as it headed straight for Zhan Yongzi's mind. Not long ago, Chu Xiu had used this soul-extinguishing arrow to injure Su Xing's spirit. Against Zhan Yongzi, this soul-extinguishing arrow was just as domineering. Although Zhan Yongzi's mental energy wasn't weak, his pure yang energy was clearly unable to completely negate the power of the soul-extinguishing arrow. Coupled with the fact that he had been heavily injured by Li Failian earlier, when the soul-extinguishing arrow shot towards him, even though Zhan Yongzi had used all his strength to block it, his mental energy was still injured by the soul-extinguishing arrow, causing Zhan Yongzi to let out a muffled groan, pain and madness appearing in his eyes. The martial artists who were watching from the side were completely stunned. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu and Li Failian would actually put Zhan Yongzi in such a difficult position? Although the two of them didn't join hands, their attacks came one after another, not giving Zhan Yongzi any room to breathe. Initially, Daoist Guangning didn't intend to interfere in this matter. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming also didn't suggest for him to interfere. However, now that Daoist Guangning noticed that something was amiss, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Although he didn't have much of a relationship with Zhan Yongzi, they were both from the 3 Dao sects. Daoist Guangning couldn't just watch Zhan Yongzi die here. However, before Daoist Guangning could make a move, Chu Xiu had already made his move. While Zhan Yongzi's mental energy was heavily injured, Chu Xiu made his move. The saber was unsheathed, filled with hatred. Hate the heavens, hate the earth, hate the people, hate himself. When that saber slashed out, an extreme amount of negative energy exploded. Hatred was the easiest way to explode one's incomparable potential. It was also the easiest way to cause one to sink into madness. The 7 demon saber harmed others but also oneself. When the hatred saber was unsheathed, it triggered the hatred in Chu Xiu's heart. It was Zhan Yongzi's hatred and everyone else's hatred. The moment the hatred saber was unsheathed, the hearts of the martial artists who saw the hatred saber were already affected. Their eyes were slightly red as they panted heavily. In the pugilistic world, killing and hatred were unavoidable. As long as one had hatred in his heart, he would be affected by the hatred saber. The hatred saber slashed out. A black saber radiance tore through the sky. The golden pure yang astral qi around Zhen Yongzi was completely stained black. Even his eyes were gradually losing their luster, leaving behind only a crazy amount of hatred. The strongest point of the seven demon saber wasn't its attack power, but its ability to trigger an extreme emotion. Although Zhen Yongzi was from a Taoist sect, he had hatred in his heart. A lot of hatred. He hated Li Feilian for killing the genius disciple of his Chunyang Dao sect. He hated Chu Xiu for slaughtering the elites of his Chunyang Dao sect. He also hated himself for being incompetent and not being able to wipe out the evil spirits in the world. He hated even more that in his generation, the Chunyang Dao sect was gradually going downhill. They were unable to regain the glory of their ancestors and had shamed their ancestors. These were all obsessions. Coupled with the fact that he'd been heavily injured by Chu Xiu earlier, these deep-rooted obsessions instantly erupted, causing him to seem as if he'd gone mad. He'd lost all reason, and he didn't put up any defense as he welcomed Chu Xiu's hateful blade with all his might. The black saber radiance tore through everything. It tore apart the astral qi around Zhen Yongzi's body and left a huge, hideous wound on his chest. He was sent flying 1,000 feet away and fell to the ground like a rag doll. The power of the hatred saber. The more you hated, the more powerful the hatred saber would be. It could even be said that Zhen Yongzi was responsible for at least half of the power of the saber. Zhen Yongzi, who was lying on the ground, had the last glimmer of clarity in his eyes. However, Chu Xiu's saber had robbed him of all his vitality. In the end, Zhen Yongzi did not even have the chance to say a word before he lost all signs of life. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. It took him a great deal of willpower to put the hatred saber back into its sheath, suppressing the boundless hatred in his heart. In an instant, the surroundings were incomparably silent. Even the battle between Xiahou Zhan and Mr. Liu had slowed down, and everyone looked at Chu Xiu with astonished gazes. This Lin Yi actually killed Zhen Yongzi. Although part of the credit for Zhen Yongzi's death was due to Li Feilian, Zhen Yongzi had died by Lin Ye's saber. There was no doubt that Lin Yi brought them the greatest shock. It was not rare for a oneness of heaven and man to kill a martial Dao master. There was Zhang Chengzhen and Chu Xiu. Even a few on the Longhu leaderboard, such as Zhong Xian, Feng Qishao, and Ying Bailu, actually had the strength to kill ordinary martial Dao masters. However, there was a gap between martial Dao masters. Zhen Yongzi was famous in the underworld. Even among the older generation of martial artists, he was considered one of the best. However, he had died by Lin Ye's hands today. To be more precise, he had died by the hands of Lin Yi and Li Feilian, two martial artists of the younger generation. This had shocked everyone present to the point that they were speechless. At that moment, everyone saw Li Feilian slowly take out another 9 flying daggers from the secret space box and insert them into his belt. This caused everyone to be stunned. Did this mean that Li Feilian had more than 10 daggers? Chu Xiu understood. Li Feilian's flying daggers were really ordinary. They were not even treasured weapons. His strength did not lie in the flying daggers themselves, but in the person who used them. He only carried 10 daggers with him because with his current strength, he could only use 10 daggers. After that, even if he had 100 more flying daggers on him, they would be useless. After packing up, Li Feilian turned around and left. No one present stopped him, nor did anyone say anything. However, it was only then that everyone seemed to realize that Li Feilian was also a ruthless person. From the moment he appeared until now, he had only one goal: to kill Zhen Yongzi. He did not even say a single word. Now that Zhen Yongzi had been killed, he had left as well. It was as clean as it could get. Chu Xiu secretly shot a glance at Lu Fengxian. Then, he turned around and left the blissful demon palace. Although Chu Xiu had killed Zhen Yongzi, he had expended a lot of his energy. He was almost at the end of his rope. Especially his mental strength. Because he had used the soul-extinguishing arrow and the hatred blade, he had used up all his mental strength. Ever since he entered the Xiaofan sky, Chu Xiu had used his mental strength in too many places. He had used up his mental strength many times. Most of the time, Chu Xiu was recovering his mental strength. Now, Chu Xiu's condition was not good. Therefore, even though he knew that there were still many treasures in the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not have the time to search for them. He could only remind Lu Fengxian to take action now and seize the initiative. Taoist Guangning was considered a kind person. However, he had killed Zhan Yongzi, who was also from the three great Tao sects. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were not easy to deal with. If Chu Xiu continued to stay here and fight with them, they would not hold back. Indeed, after Chu Xiu left, Taoist Guangning was still holding the horsetail whisk and Tao sword in his hands. He subconsciously wanted to stop him. However, in the end, he sighed and gave up. Zhen Yongzi was already dead. What was the use of stopping him now? Actually, Taoist Guangning was prepared to help. However, who would have thought that Lin Ye's attack was too fast? He killed Zhan Yongzi with a single slash, not giving him a chance to help at all. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were happy to see this. Lin Yi escaped with heavy injuries. Of the two martial Tao grandmasters who came in, one was dead, and the other was still fighting with Mr. Lu. No matter how they looked at it, they would not be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, there was a commotion below. It turned out that Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng had already started attacking the armory's formation, snatching the cultivation methods and treasures within. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming immediately snorted coldly. This group of juniors was quite fast. However, most of the items in the blissful demon palace still belonged to them, the martial Tao grandmasters. With that thought in mind, Yu Qifeng and the other two also entered the fray. The entire blissful demon palace instantly became a mess. Mr. Lu and Xiahou Zhan stopped at the same time. Mr. Lu sneered at Xiahou Zhan. Patriarch Xiahou, I wonder if you still think that I'm qualified to fight with you. Chapter 571. Xiahou Zhan's expression was gloomy. He had such a good opportunity today, but he failed to avenge his son's death. He had a feeling that it would be even more difficult for him to take revenge in the future. He had never expected that Zhan Yongzi would die. That Lin Yi had actually killed Zhan Yongzi. Regardless of whether Li Feilian had interfered or not, and regardless of the situation at the time, anyone who could kill a martial Tao master at the unity of heaven and man realm was not simple. Moreover, Lin Yi was an outstanding figure cultivated by the Yinma clan, so he would definitely be protected by the Yinma clan to a certain extent, just like now. Once Lin Yi stepped into the martial Tao master realm, even Xiahou Zhan was not confident that he could defeat him. Xiahou Zhan looked at Mr. Lu coldly and snorted, then turned around and left. Another troublesome figure had appeared in the phaseless demon sect. Previously, this Mr. Lu was not eye-catching in the phaseless demon sect, but now that he had stepped into the martial Tao master realm, the power he displayed was shocking. He was actually able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Xiahou Zhan, who had stepped into the martial Tao master realm for more than 10 years. There were many crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the demonic path, and it was definitely not as simple as it seemed to the outside world. After Xiahou Zhan left, Mr. Lu sneered in disdain. He also entered the blissful devil palaces and began to search for some treasures. Mr. Lu was actually very low-key before, but after stepping into the martial Tao master realm, he wanted to find someone to test his strength on. Previously, when Chu Xiu was being hunted, he wanted to rescue Chu Xiu and fight Nie Renlong at the same time. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would come back himself? In a dense forest over 10 miles east of the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not go far. Instead, he left a unique mark of the Yinma clan outside and temporarily recovered his strength. After half a day, Mr. Lu appeared here. What was even more strange was that Li Feilian was following behind him. Mr. Lu said to Li Feilian, "This is the most outstanding young talent of the Yinma clan, Lin Yi. You guys were fighting side by side just now, so you should be very familiar with each other." Li Feilian cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said simply, "Brother Chu." Li Feilian didn't seem to be good with words. He spoke very little, to the point where he treated his words like gold. Chu Xiu also cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said, "Brother Li's flying dagger is very strong. In fact, it's the strongest flying dagger I've ever seen. If there's a chance in the future, I hope to exchange pointers with Brother Li." Li Feilian nodded and said, "You flatter me." Seeing Li Feilian's appearance, Chu Xiu knew that it would be very difficult to chat with him. Chu Xiu turned to Mr. Lu and asked, "Brother Li, are you also a member of the Yinma clan?" Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Friend Li has nothing to do with my Yinma clan, he only has some relationship with my phaseless demon sect." Friend Li's lineage had a great background. Although it was only a single lineage, no one dared to look down on them. However, when it came to Friend Li's father's generation, there were some problems that caused his father to die early. That's why he entrusted our phaseless demon sect to help take care of Friend Li. Our phaseless demon sect leader had received Friend Li's father's kindness in the past. In other words, if Friend Li's father was still alive, he should be one of the experts who stood at the peak of the Jianghu. Not to mention that Friend Li killed a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. Even if he killed the son of the Chunyang Dao sect leader, his father would still be able to take it. At that time, our phaseless demon sect was hiding in the dark, so it wasn't convenient for us to fight against the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, we could only use some methods to help Friend Li conceal his identity and temporarily lay low. Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Chu Xiu finally understood what was going on back then. No wonder Chunyang Dao sect couldn't find Li Failian even after searching 3 feet deep. It turned out that he had actually been hidden by the phaseless demon sect. Putting aside their strength, the phaseless demon sect's concealment skills were definitely top-notch. Li Failian cupped his hands towards Mr. Lu and said, "I've already killed him. I've avenged half of the past. Mr. Lu, farewell for now." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Danger lurks everywhere in Xiaofan world. Be careful." Li Failian nodded and turned to leave directly. Looking at Li Failian's back, Chu Xiu said to Mr. Lu, "Coincidentally, Li Failian's father died early in an accident. Didn't the Yinma lineage think of taking Li Failian into the Yinma lineage?" Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Our phaseless demon sect really thought about this, but Li Failian didn't agree. His lineage was neither righteous nor demonic, and basically did whatever he wanted. His father was an outstanding person of his generation. He had friends in all 3 lineages and was very popular. It was a pity that he died early. Otherwise, he would also be a distinguished figure of his generation." Li Failian's father was kind to the sect master. Since Li Failian wasn't willing, the sect master naturally wouldn't force him. Speaking of which, Li Failian was also a pitiful person. His lineage was not ordinary people, and Li Failian's father was even more so. He could be said to be handsome and elegant. He was very similar to that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. However, he was rather dissolute and left behind many dissolute debts in the Jianghu. Compared to Li Failian's father, his mother was extremely ordinary. She wasn't even someone from the Jianghu. She was just an extremely ordinary-looking peasant girl. In the end, it was this peasant girl who made Li Failian's father stop being dissolute. She even gave birth to Li Failian. This made many people's jaws drop at that time. Li Failian's appearance was also like his mother's. If he was like his father's, he probably wouldn't be much worse than that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. There were almost no ugly people in his lineage. All of them were handsome and elegant. Although Li Failian wasn't ugly, he was too mediocre. He didn't look like his ancestor at all. Originally, with Li Failian's background, his life should have been smooth sailing. However, when his father died, he wasn't even 10 years old. His mother even followed his father in committing suicide. Therefore, he had to rely on himself for the past 20 years. It wasn't until he couldn't hold on anymore that he turned to the phaseless demon sect for help. I still remember that Li Failian's personality was very lively when he was young. He took after his father. However, as you can see now, he was silent and treasured his words like gold. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk, but he didn't know how to talk at all. Although his father passed the inheritance to him when he died, he was afraid that someone would covet his lineage's inheritance. Therefore, he went to the 100,000 mountains alone to cultivate in the ancestral land of his lineage. Although it was called the ancestral land, it was actually a graveyard protected by a formation. It was accompanied by the dead all day long. It wasn't until he reached the unity of heaven and man level in his 20s that he came out of seclusion. However, at that time, Li Failian even forgot how to speak. Hearing this, Chu Xiu nodded. To be honest, he really didn't expect Li Failian's life to be so rough. The world could only see how glorious the group of geniuses ranked on the Longhu roll were, but in fact, everyone's strength didn't come out of nowhere. Although the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen was born with the thunder mark on his palm, who knew that in order to cultivate the thunder art, he even risked serious injuries to cultivate in a rainstorm to comprehend the concept of heavenly thunder? Wisdom King Zhongshuan's physical body was invincible among those of the same rank, But who knew the inhuman pain of cultivating the Moonlight King's glazed golden body? It was the same for Chu Xiu. From a nobody to the top 5 of the Longhu roll, how many enemies had Chu Xiu killed, and how many times had he fallen into desperate situations? Even the most unreliable Feng Qi Xiao, a talkative guy, had once sat alone in seclusion for 81 days in order to comprehend the sword art. He didn't eat, drink, sleep, or rest. When he came out of seclusion, he was already haggard. The saying that one can only become a superior person after suffering the most hardships wasn't 100% reliable. However, those who obtained great power without any hardships were always in the minority. At this time, Mr. Lu suddenly looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "If the Yinma clan took Li Feilian in, do you think you can still receive such treatment? Aren't you afraid that the Yinma clan will cultivate Li Feilian with all their strength?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Those who can't bear to see others do well and rely on others to become kings are destined to be unsuccessful. Take Sword King City's Lin Kaiyun for example. Even without Feng Qi Xiao, he wouldn't have become the strongest among the Sword King City's younger generation. I don't need to fear anyone. As long as I'm stronger than any of my competitors, that's enough." Mr. Lu nodded inwardly. Everyone could talk big, but he could hear from Chu Xiu's tone that Chu Xiu wasn't talking big. He was confident, extremely confident. Moreover, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he had the right to be confident. "By the way, Mr. Lu, how's the competition in the Blissful Demon Palace? Who got the most?" Mr. Lu's face darkened. "With the power of my Sky Demon formless art, it's most suitable to win in the chaos. I should have gotten the most. However, those guys from the righteous path like to outnumber me. When they saw that they couldn't stop me, the 3 of them joined hands, causing me to get a lot less. Even so, I still got about 20% of the treasures in the Blissful Demon Palace. By the way, your friends Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng aren't weak. Not only did they seize the initiative, they also took advantage of the chaos to snatch a lot of things when I was fighting those 3 guys. They're second only to us 4 martial Dao grandmasters." Chu Xiu nodded. It was fine as long as he didn't suffer any losses. Chu Xiu didn't ask Mr. Lu what he got. Although he had a good relationship with Mr. Lu, friendship was friendship, and rules were rules. Just like how Mr. Lu didn't ask Chu Xiu about the usage and origin of the 7-demon saber. Some things could be said by oneself, but it was taboo for others to ask. Although Mr. Lu was a martial Dao grandmaster now, in his opinion, Chu Xiu's potential and current combat strength had far surpassed most martial Dao grandmasters. Naturally, Mr. Lu wouldn't become enemies with Chu Xiu just for a few treasures. It wasn't worth it. It was no different from throwing away a watermelon to pick up a sesame seed. Chapter 572. After Chu Xiu recovered his strength, he was ready to act with Mr. Lu. Before the final battle, Chu Xiu did not intend to reveal his true identity. Although the identity of the Devil Path could not be used to its peak in a chaotic battle, it was actually much more useful than his public identity. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He asked Mr. Lu, "Mr. Lu, have you ever heard of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths?" Mr. Lu frowned and said, "You mean the lunatic from ancient times? How do you know him?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I got the Hungry Ghost incarnation of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths." Chu Xiu had already used the Hungry Ghost incarnation before, so he did not need to hide it from Mr. Lu this time. Moreover, Chu Xiu was going to ask Mr. Lu for help to solve the problem of the Hungry Ghost incarnation. Mr. Lu was shocked when he heard this. "You are not going to practice this evil method, are you? I advise you to stop thinking about it. The Devil Venerable of 6 Paths is simply a lunatic. The cultivation method he passed down can only be practiced by lunatics. Now our Yinma clan is not the same as the Kunlun Devil cult in the past. If you dare to practice the evil method of the Hungry Ghost incarnation, our Yinma clan can't protect you." Mr. Lu was a standard member of the Devil Path. Over the years, he had led the phaseless demon sect to do things in the dark and killed countless people. Therefore, what Mr. Lu cared about was not that the Hungry Ghost incarnation was against heaven and earth. If the Kunlun Devil cult was still there, Chu Xiu could practice as he wanted. What he cared about was the consequences of practicing this evil method. After all, the righteous Wu Lin was now powerful. Once they found out, Chu Xiu would cause great trouble. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course I'm not going to practice it. In fact, I don't have the method to practice it." As he spoke, Chu Xiu briefly told Mr. Lu about Yu Xian and the incarnation of the hungry ghost realm. Mr. Lu stroked his chin and said, "So, you're the only one in this world who has an incarnation of the hungry ghost realm? This is also your good fortune, but it is also a problem." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It is indeed troublesome. That is why I wanted to ask Mr. Lu if you have any way to minimize the impact of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation. After all, the phaseless demon sect has done a lot of research in this area." The phaseless demon sect's techniques were all-inclusive, and the sky demon phaseless mystic technique was only one of them. There were also disguises, aura concealment, and even arrays, goo techniques, and other messy things. Perhaps the phaseless demon sect had a way to deal with the side effects of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation, so that it wouldn't get excited and swallow him. Mr. Lu pondered for a while and said, "I told you that the demonic venerable of 6 paths was a madman. Only a madman could cultivate something that was created by a madman. Right now, that hungry ghost realm incarnation is just a spirit. It only has instincts and no intelligence, so when it attacks, you naturally can't control it. That thing will only act according to its instincts. If this hungry ghost realm incarnation is refined, it will be equivalent to a clone of the demonic venerable of 6 paths. That guy has 6 extra personalities, and rumor has it that he has even researched the soul-splitting technique. When the time comes, he can cut off a personality and integrate it into one, then he can control it like a puppet. Naturally, he won't have to worry about the backlash. You don't have a split personality, so of course there will be problems if you use that madman's technique. It should be said that that guy's technique can only be cultivated by himself. Anyone else who cultivates it will have problems." With that said, Mr. Lu suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Puppet? I think of a person, and I'll take you to meet him. I believe he should have a solution." Who? Mr. Lu led Chu Xiu to the east and said, "The rogue cultivator of the Yinma clan, demon puppeteer Gong Shu Yuan, a guy with a strange temper. If he has a way to solve your problem, you have to give him something that can satisfy him first. Otherwise, that guy won't give face to anyone." Along the way, Mr. Lu also told Chu Xiu about the demon puppeteer Gong Shu Yuan. This person was also considered to be different in the diabolism. Gong Shu Yuan used to have an extraordinary background. He was a direct disciple of the Black Tortoise School, one of the 4 spirits, and even one of the successors of the Black Tortoise School. Among the 4 spirits, the Black Tortoise School was the most low-key, because most of the disciples of the Black Tortoise School were not good at fighting. They were good at making all kinds of mechanical tools, puppet traps, and the like. In fact, the Tang family fort in Sichuan was also good at making all kinds of mechanical hidden weapons. However, the Tang family fort was good at making some exquisite and powerful hidden weapons, most of which were dipped in poison. The ones made by the Black Tortoise School were not actually hidden weapons. They were just mechanical tools, large-scale war machines. For example, the Black Tortoise School once made 100 god-destroying crossbows for the Northern Yen. Each crossbow bolt was 10 feet long, and the body of the crossbow was engraved with formation patterns. Each bolt was individually made. It was said that one bolt could destroy a city, and even a martial Dao grandmaster would be pierced. Of course, this was only in theory. Big cities were protected by formations, and a crossbow bolt could not penetrate them. And small cities that could be penetrated by one bolt could be easily conquered by sending troops. Why would such a precious thing be needed? Moreover, using this thing to deal with martial Dao grandmasters was the same. Martial Dao grandmasters were not targets, so of course they would dodge. For example, if Chu Xiu stepped into the martial Dao grandmaster realm, these crossbow bolts would not even be able to touch him when he used the heaven sun gazing at air skill. He could even use a straw boat to borrow the bolts. Therefore, this thing was of little value. Most importantly, the Northern Yen had been cheated once. The god-destroying crossbow that the Black Tortoise School gave to the Northern Yen only had one bolt, and they had to buy more after they ran out. In the end, the price of the bolt was the same as the body of the crossbow. It was simply a scam. Because of this, the old emperor of the Northern Yen, Xiang Long, almost beheaded the official who had bought these things. Of course, this was only an immature product of the Black Tortoise School. What the Black Tortoise School was really good at were puppets. They were mechanical puppets that looked like real people, and some of them were even comparable to martial Dao grandmasters. Refining a puppet was very complicated. One needed to be proficient in refining, formations, and martial arts at the same time. At the same time, the parts on each puppet were more than the bones in a human body. Some key parts also needed to be engraved with formation patterns. Therefore, the Black Tortoise School took years to refine a puppet. As the most outstanding disciple of the Black Tortoise School in the past, Gong Shu Yuan had once refined a qualified puppet when he was only at the Three-Flower Realm. Although it was a little crude, its strength was better than most martial artists at the Five-Cheese Origin Realm. If he had developed normally, it would not have been a problem for Gong Shu Yuan to become the next leader of the Black Tortoise School. However, his mistake was that he was a little crazy when it came to refining puppets. He was not satisfied with using inanimate objects to refine puppets, so he secretly used human corpses to refine puppets. In the end, he even used living people to refine puppets. This was a big taboo in the Black Tortoise School. However, Gong Shu Yuan still did not think that he was wrong. In his opinion, puppets were originally avatars of martial artists. They pursued extreme lethality. What was the difference in materials used to refine them? In the end, Gong Shu Yuan was imprisoned by the angry leader of the Black Tortoise School. He wanted to hold a meeting to deal with him, but who would have thought that the puppet that Gong Shu Yuan had refined would be disguised as a disciple? He was released and thrown into the demonic path. Using people to refine puppets was evil everywhere. It was only in the demonic path that this kind of thing was not new. It was actually very normal. Mr. Lu led Chu Xiao for dozens of miles and arrived at a hidden valley. As they walked, Mr. Lu complained, "That guy Gong Shu Yuan is simply sick. Xiaofan Tian only opens once every 30 years. Everyone else comes here to find opportunities, but he comes here to find materials." After finding them, he actually started to refine puppets in the valley. He even said that this place is rich in spirit qi and is more suitable for carving formation patterns. It is a waste to give him the opportunity to open Xiaofan Tian. When Mr. Lu stepped into the valley, a dense golden formation pattern suddenly appeared in front of him. The golden formation pattern was like a blade that could tear through earth qi and flesh-treasured weapons. Every puppet master from the Divine Force School was also a formation master. Mr. Lu said unhappily, "It's me. Put away the formation." After a while, the formation disappeared. Chu Xiao and Mr. Lu stepped into the valley and saw a small old man squatting in a pile of messy parts. The small old man's hair was messy, and he was slovenly. He wore a dirty black robe. It was hard to imagine that he was a martial arts master. According to Mr. Lu, Gong Shu Yuan was an outstanding disciple of the Black Force School when he was young. He was also an outstanding figure in Jianghu. Now that he had become like this, only God knew what Gong Shu Yuan had experienced. Looking at Mr. Lu, Gong Shu Yuan said unhappily, "Lu Jin, I told you not to disturb me. What are you doing here?" Mr. Lu snorted and said, "Of course I have something to talk to you about. This is a young talent of my Yinma branch, Lin Yi. You should have heard of his name. He needs your help with something." As he spoke, Mr. Lu told Gong Shu Yuan about the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. After listening, Gong Shu Yuan had a strange expression, but he was not as impatient as before. "Teseske, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path of the Six Paths Demon Lord? Interesting. Show me that thing first." Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "It's here." Gong Shu Yuan said unhappily, "Of course it's here. If you don't look, how will I know how to solve it? There are two martial arts masters here. Are you afraid that you can't control the situation?" Hearing Gong Shu Yuan say this, Chu Xiao immediately mobilized his spiritual force and released the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. In an instant, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path was released. The evil aura that could devour and assimilate everything instantly erupted. Even the surrounding qi of heaven and earth was completely devoured. Okay. Take it back." Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand. Only then did Chu Xiao take back the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. However, in just a few seconds, his face was already a little pale. Mr. Lu asked, "Is there a way?" Gong Shu Yuan narrowed his eyes and said, "There is a way, and there is more than one. However, it is very difficult to bring out the greatest power of the incarnation of the hungry ghost path." "Lu Jin, you should know about puppets. What do you think of this thing?" that you're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.